start with a few introductions. To my right and your left is our Public Information Director, Maureen Key, Planning Director, Jay Camp, Town Clerk, Lori Campino, Commissioner Ken McCool, Commissioner John Urban, Commissioner Dave Land, Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, and I'm John Higdon, Mayor Matthews, Town Manager Hazen Blodgett, Mayor Pro Tem Renee Garner, Commissioner Larry Whitley, Commissioner Jeff Miller, and Assistant Town Manager Becky Hawk. Let's start with the safety minute, and I'll get the Town Manager to review that, please.
All right, again, welcome to the fourth meeting. Everybody, if you'll just make sure to put your purses, satchels, and briefcases under your chair so there's kind of a clear aisle. Also, there's an AED at the back of the room if somebody has trouble. Also, okay, it's on. And also,
just be conscientious that there's exits out if you go out the door on the left and the right, there's stairs. So just, I would say, in general, for all public buildings, just be aware of your surroundings as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. Now go to agenda item 3, the invocation. Commissioner Whitley.
If you would, those who would like to join me in prayer. Our Father, we thank you for another day, a very life, our health, and for strength. Now, Lord, we need your wisdom as this board, as we make decisions for the town of Matthews. We need your wisdom to guide us to make good decisions for the town. Also, we are asking for prayer for recovery for this coronavirus, that it not come near us, but shield us, this town and the state. Lord, we know that everything is in control by you. And so we ask that for those towns who are now affected, that you would touch them and comfort them as they go through this virus, that we might find a cure. And we ask that as well too. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner Whitley. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance now, and I understand we have Troop 39. Dennis, would your group like to come forward and help us do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would you guys like to tell us what schools you go to and why you're here?
All right. I'm Lachlan Bailey. I go to Weddington High School, and I'm taking the Citizenship in the Community Merit Badge. And so we have to visit a town hall meeting to just check it out.
I'm Luke Shepard. I go to McClintock Middle School, and I'm also with Citizenship in the Community.
I'm Will McKean. I go to Crestone Middle School, and I'm also here for Citizenship.
Great. Thank you. All right, Mr. Manager, are there any items to be added to the agenda?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we're going to have a coronavirus update. Chief Ginsburg.
Mayor, members of council, there's a memo coming around. I apologize for the formatting. My computer has a virus. So as soon as I get that fixed, we'll get you a good, clean copy that makes sense. So as Commissioner Whitley mentioned, the virus, the coronavirus, COVID-19 is the official name. It's known by multiple names. What we do know about the virus currently, it is spread by airborne droplets that can be inhaled or can be picked up off of a surface. So if someone coughs on a table and you put your hand on it and then you scratch your nose, you could get it. It was first identified in China in December of 2019. So remember, just at the beginning of March. so less than 90 days. As of 2:30 today, there were 45,338 active cases worldwide, 60,695 recovering cases, and 3,803 deaths. It's a 3% death rate for those infected by the disease, which is in line with the normal seasonal flu worldwide. But we'll talk about that in a minute. 12 states in the United States have confirmed cases, including North Carolina, where we have 2. The threat in North Carolina is considered low, although because we're a major metropolitan area and transportation hub, we will see cases. Today, the Charlotte Observer reported that a South Carolina resident came through Charlotte Douglas who had visited Italy and is being isolated due to exposure to the virus. 80% of cases have minimal symptoms. You can be asymptomatic and have coronavirus. While the number of worldwide cases is increasing daily, the number of cases identified in China is decreasing daily, and the number of those recovering is increasing daily. So all the charts are going in the right direction. There is no vaccine, and one is not expected for at least a year. This is like a new case of the flu. They have to take a shot at what the shot is going to be and how effective it's going to be. So what are we doing in Charlotte-Mecklenburg? Mecklenburg County Public Health is the lead agency for the coronavirus situation. Emergency management is coordinating efforts. Public health is pushing out information on a regular basis from the CDC and other sources. A working group's been established that includes emergency management, public health, medic, police, fire, and Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. Matthews supports the leadership of the Mecklenburg County Health Department and the county's combined interagency response efforts to the situation to combat the spread of COVID-19. Medic has initiated an emerging infectious disease surveillance tool as part of their EMD regimen. So they will ask pertinent questions from the caller. Atrium and Novant are asking similar questions when someone arrives in the ED. Medic is working on and distributing instructional communications to first responders, fire, and police. Charlotte Fire is going to handle logistics for first responders. If you've been to Walmart, there is no hand sanitizer, there is no bottled water, there are no masks. It's just a little crazy. Metrolina Healthcare Preparedness Coalition is coordinating with area hospitals and nursing facilities. So what can we do? The main focus is on preventing the spread of the disease. We do that through good personal hygiene, hand washing, avoiding unnecessary contact, covering your cough, environmental cleanliness, wash and disinfect frequently touched areas, doorknobs, tables, chairs, elevator buttons, things of that nature. Use normal household cleaners and disinfectants in their regular proportions. Twice as much is not twice as good. If community and social distancing, they recommend we stay at least 3 meters away from people, but you know that's just not possible. But again, handshaking, a little personal space is good. Daily mask wearing is not recommended, and it is not effective in stopping the spread of the disease. We need to attempt to minimize the anxiety experienced by the community. We're going to communicate regularly with the community and guide them toward trusted sources of information like the CDC, World Health, and the County Health Department. We should work on our continuity of operations plan. We need to give consideration to the fact that it is possible that a large number of people in our workforce could be exposed and may have to be isolated. So we need redundancy in critical functions and contingency plans for supplies. We need to conserve PPE now. As we've mentioned, supplies are already taxed, and the public is concerned there won't be any available when we need that. Symptoms of the disease are just like the seasonal flu: temperature over 100.4, a cough, respiratory difficulty. The difference is COVID-19 has a very rapid onset and a rapid decline in respiratory function. It advances to viral pneumonia. The primary risk for COVID-19 are the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions and compromised immune systems. There's been a lot of talk about isolation versus quarantine. Isolation involves having persons who have been exposed be isolated, preferably in their home, for up to 14 days. Quarantine is where you put a large number of people who may have been exposed in one place, and what you wind up with is a large number of people who get sick. So we don't want that. The cruise ships are perfect examples of quarantine incubators. There have been quite a few stories about states and cities declaring a state of emergency. That's a misunderstood term. They are declaring a state of emergency because they have recognized that their potential to handle a large-scale outbreak of CVID, they do not have that capability. So California has already declared a state of emergency. New York City has declared a state of emergency. That opens the channels for coordination of effort by local responders. A word of caution to our elected leaders. Our main focus is to avoid community spread. This is not a political issue. This is a public health issue. Tensions are high. The public is nervous. All information communicated about CVID or the county's response needs to be from verified sources of information. And I'll just say, you have to be careful with illustrations in newspapers or online. North Carolina has 2 cases, the entire state is red. So you're not getting a real clear picture. But again, 3% death rate in the typical populations. The increase in the original onset area has gone down, and the recovery has gone up, so that's what we hope for nationwide. Any questions I can attempt to ask?
Thank you, Chief Kinneberg. Any questions? Commissioner Whitley.
Chief, Mecklenburg County, do we have testing kits?
I believe we do.
And follow-up question, are those testing kits available to the 6 surrounding towns?
If they would be available to Mecklenburg County, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Chief Kinneberg? Thank you. We appreciate your presentation tonight. It's a serious issue, but we'll get through it, I feel certain.
Yep.
I know that one thing I've heard that people are most concerned about is there's no toilet paper in the stores. That could be an issue. But I would like to say in all seriousness that we are in a really good place with Charlotte Mecklenburg. These are top-notch professionals. They know what they're doing, and they're giving us great advice. So we're in good hands. And let's just pray that this passes soon. Move on to agenda item number 8. I'm sorry, 7. Public's went ahead here tonight. Public comment sign-up sheet. We have one person, Mr. Rob Jasek, to talk about the downtown mobility plan. Mr. Jasek.
Will there be an opportunity to speak about the mobility plan after the presentation? About the mobility team? Or shall I do that now?
You should do it now.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Yes, I know there's a presentation about the mobility study this evening. I was part of that committee, and I just wanted to share some feedback about the committee and the study itself. I am the co-chairman of the Red Brick Partnership. I'm representing my 2 businesses here in downtown Matthews, which is Carolina Beer Temple, Seaboard Taproom and Wine Bar. I'm also representing Seaboard Brewery, the Exchange Pizza Depot, the Portrait Gallery, and the recently announced Six Grogs. As part of the committee, I thought the committee did a fantastic job. We went through looking at the troubled areas in downtown Matthews, mostly regarding safety and parking. I think those were the two things at least that stood out for me, and they remain probably the top two issues. The committee did prioritize what was the troubled areas around town, particularly some crosswalks. The crosswalk right at the end of the street here, on Trade Street and Matthews Station Street. If anybody wants to sit out there on a Friday or Saturday afternoon, you can see how dangerous that crosswalk can be at times, which was one of the top troubled areas that was highlighted by the committee. Trade and John Street has also always been a trouble point for people. We've seen lots and lots of foot traffic there, especially in the warmer weather time when the Food Truck Friday is taking place at Stumptown Park and other events that take place at Stumptown Park during the warmer weather. There's lots of foot traffic that's taking place there. Parking is going to continue to be an issue in downtown Matthews, and this group did focus a lot on parking, and I think we came up with some really good ideas and some alternatives to how we can address some of the parking issues. If you did not see in the Charlotte agenda a few weeks ago, Matthews was quoted the next south end of the area, right? And the reason for that is because of the foot traffic we have here, the bars, the restaurants, all these things going on in downtown Matthews, we're going to see more and more traffic coming here. We know that. And so I'm just a big proponent of the mobility study. I really want to just emphasize that the mobility study did a great job. The committee did a fantastic job. And I will leave it at that. I just want to leave my support for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jason. Now we'll move on to agenda item 8. Jay, could you recognize the planning board, please?
Good evening. Planning board representation this evening: Jana Reeve, Mike Rowan, Carrie Lamson, and our chair, David Weiser.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to recess our regular meeting for public hearings on applications to amend the Unified Development Ordinance and Land Use Map of the Town of Matthews.
So moved. Second.
A motion by Commissioner Whitley, seconded by Commissioner Urban. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. We'll now consider zoning application 2020-709 BAPS to change the zoning from R15 and RICD to RICD on 3 parcels designated as 2416 Stevens Mill Road and 2021 and 2050 Independence Commerce Drive, and being property belonging to BAPS Charlotte LLC and further designated as tax parcels 215, 094, 02, 03, and 06. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be in front of you this evening. This is an application for change of rezoning conditions and a rezoning for the BAPS Mandir, which I learned tonight is the Gurdjieff name for temple. And as I move forward here, whoops, excuse me. There's three parcels in question, 2 of which are already zoned RI, and 1 is currently zoned R15. The applicant owner is BAPS Charlotte, and currently the size of the site is 15.96 acres. This is, I have highlighted the 1 acre tract where there's currently a single family home. Let me get my pointer up there. And this is the site that is currently zoned R15, surrounding 2 parcels, large one here and this one here, are zoned RI, CD. This is another aerial of the site. You can see that it's mostly wooded and vacant except for the single-family residence. Previously, there was an approved site plan, and this was approved in November 11th of 2019. As you can see, it did not include the 1 acre or the tract with the single-family home, and the new site plan is the next one. Oh, excuse me. It includes the single-family tract as well as the previous 2 tracts that were rezoned RICD. I'm going to go. This is a little bit easier to read. So the revised site plan encompasses the 15.96 acres.
And the conditions all remain the same except for there's three additional conditions that the applicant is proposing. They are listed here, but in summary, the first condition has to do with tree preservation and revegetation. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in the next slide. The second is for the temporary construction access drive. And then the third new condition is basically to have concrete trucks using the Stevens Mill Road construction entrance. Tree save, the RI district requires a 15% tree save. The applicant is proposing 1.8 acres of existing canopy to be saved. That's about 12.4%. And so mitigation will be 4.44 acres, which equates to a tree save of 15.4 total. The 0.44 acres is about 3%, so together they're just over the 15% requirement. Two stormwater facilities are proposed, and the PCO plan has been submitted to the county for review. Land use plan does not make specific recommendations for the site. However, the surrounding area has evolved, and we have Harmony Hills Townhomes there, and also the Team Church nearby. Place of worship is an acceptable use of at this location. The proposed development is consistent with nearby land uses and the land use plan, which calls for institutional uses at the intersection of I-485 and US 74. The staff comments were somewhat minimal in our development review committee meeting. The issue was brought up that there's a possible opportunity for connectivity between Stevens Mill Road and Independence Commerce Drive. However, we feel that the connectivity of the site is very adequate at this time. Also, it's a much cleaner site plan. There is much better circulation and use of the tract. And I'm going to go back to this guy. So this is the revised site plan. That is all I have from the staff report.
Okay, Rob, the footprint of the temple itself has changed, correct?
It has. Let me revise a little bit back here. So this is the approved site plan. And then this is it's very difficult to see on this, so I like to use this one, but this is the revised site plan.
Square footage is essentially the same?
Yes, sir. The square footage is a maximum of, I believe, 90,000 with, and that's the same as it was in the previous site plan. Even though the shape is a little different.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none. Are there any questions from the planning board? For Rob. Is the applicant here?
They are.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Ty Schaefer, Robinson Bradshaw in Charlotte, 101 North Tryon Street. We represent the applicant. Mayor, commissioners, planning board members, it's good to be with you all again. Some of you may be wondering why so soon, but we'll speak to that momentarily. We do have a representative of the applicant here, Mr. Patel. Clever Design, the architects working on the project are here as well. Block Design, the site plan engineers are here as well. This is familiar to some of you. I know we have some new faces that were not on the board in November. Mr. Will gave a great overview, but I'll ask your patience. I do think it's worth going into a little more detail on what those conditions were that the applicant agreed to with the town in the fall. So I'll propose to cover an overview of the approved plan, talk a bit about the applications before you now, similarities and differences. We have the architects here to speak about the elevations. I think in the interest of time, we'll just leave that in the event you have questions. They're essentially the same with a few minor modifications to materials that give them some flexibility as they continue to work through final designs of what we think is a pretty impressive structure that the applicant proposes. So we were here in November 11, 2019. The board approved a rezoning application for 2 parcels. This is the approved site plan. You'll see, Mr. Will mentioned, this residential parcel was not part of that plan. The site plan included a rather generic building envelope up to 90,000 square feet. At the time, the applicant was anticipating about a 70,000 square foot building on the site. Parking concentrated to the east and the southeast of the site, and 2 permanent entrance points were proposed. The primary entrance point being off of Independence Commerce Drive, which would allow worshipers to approach the temple portion of the site directly from the east. And then a second permanent access point onto Stevens Mill Road that would be used for days where there was worship or events, deliveries. Otherwise, the applicant proposed to gate that second access point. We spent a lot of time last year working through a number of matters related to this site. One of those really concentrated on protection of Independence Commerce Drive. We worked with Mr. Martin, the representative of the business park across the street. We worked with the town and with the board to try to find ways to preserve the business park's access to that road during construction, but then also once the site was complete during regular operations. And then also site challenges, grade issues. I think we explained to the board a couple of times that the topography of the site made it impossible to accommodate a permanent access drive off of Mount Harmony Church Road onto that site. The conditions that were agreed to by the applicant and the town in November, first among them was the inclusion of a temporary third access that would be used during construction. That would be located in this area of the site here, where we're showing in the new application a relocated permanent drive. Following completion of grading on the site, the applicant committed that all construction activities, so parking, staging, stacking, that all was going to take place on site. Concrete trucks making deliveries for building the pad on the site would have to use that temporary third access. This is an exhibit that we shared with the board showing how that would work in practice. The blue tracks show how construction traffic would be expected to flow throughout the site, and then the pink areas show where parking and staging would be able to take place. All of that concentrated on site, getting it off the roads in the area once the site has been graded. Some other conditions that the applicant and the town agreed to, the applicant's contractors would have to manage traffic on Independence Commerce Drive to ensure that the business park would continue to have access from their main drive across from the site. In order to protect space for tractor trailers to make turning movements in and out of the business park, they agreed with the town's permission that they would stripe a no parking area on Independence Commerce Drive directly across from the entrance into the business park. Agreed that they wouldn't park in the cul-de-sac. Agreed that they would restore Independence Commerce Drive to the condition that it was in before they started site development and construction. Also agreed that metal tracked vehicles would have to be brought to the site on truck, taken off the site on truck to protect the street network. Additional conditions, I mentioned the permanent access point on Stevens Mill Road could be gated. For any event where they expected more than 200 guests, that gate would have to be opened and used. And then for any event on the weekdays where they expect more than 200 guests, the applicant agreed that they would engage off-duty police officers to direct traffic at both of those access points on Independence Commerce Drive and also on Stevens Mill Road. I will note the applicant does anticipate that, it did anticipate at the time, and I think still does, that the permanent access drive on Stevens Mill Road would be what was primarily used for deliveries to the site for trash and recycling pickup, because that would be closest to where the docks would be on the building as they were expecting it to be laid out. Finally, could lead into what I just said, after a comment that was received from neighbors at the community meeting, the applicant agreed that they would restrict any trash recycling pickup to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The applicant also agreed they would work with the town arborist to get recommendations for appropriate internal plantings, streetscape plantings, and then there were architectural commitments that the applicant made, so elevations and building materials commitments. So that's the list of conditions that were agreed to by the applicant and the town in November of last year. So we're back before you. Why back so quickly? As the board were considering the application, the applicant was able to put that additional parcel under contract. And when I know, at least in my case, when I say that, I don't mean it figuratively. I mean actually that night during the break in the public hearing is when I found out that the applicant had put that additional parcel under contract. And so the request before you tonight is to amend the site plan that was approved for the 2 parcels and then change the zoning for the residential parcel that was acquired in order to incorporate it in the overall plan for the site. This is the rendered site plan that you saw a moment ago. We'll have Colin come speak in a minute in some more detail about the technical site plan. But some of the physical site plan changes that adding the additional parcel, which is in this area here, enables the applicant to do. One is to move the permanent Stevens Mill access point to the far east, which is a location that was identified for the temporary construction access. The building envelope has been shifted up and to the east because of the inclusion of that additional parcel. There's some more detail on what the footprint of that building would look like. I believe that is currently showing 67,000 square feet as the anticipated building size for the site. It also enabled the applicant to commit to this open space area here on the site to be preserved. It also enabled them to break up the parking on the site. You'll see that it's concentrated here, but then also additional parking here. As we'll see, they will utilize the existing driveway on the residential parcel that they acquired. That's where they will locate the third access, the temporary construction period access into the site. So all of the conditions are carried over with the exception of the following changes. The condition that was agreed to regarding concrete trucks accessing the site on Stevens Mill Road, that condition was that they would only use the temporary access drive. The applicant is proposing that instead those concrete trucks be able to use either of the Stevens Mill Road access points during the construction period. And then the additional change is that the applicant does explicitly anticipate the possibility of mitigating tree save, adds an additional commitment to revegetate at a rate of 54 trees per acre. And I think we'll hear some more from Block Design about how actually adding the additional parcel has made things a bit more difficult for the applicant when it comes to tree save matters. So I'll turn it over to Colin to talk a bit about that, technical issues with the site plan, answer any questions. And then we do have an exhibit that addresses how this site will be screened from the property at 2417 Stevens Mill Road across the street. If you read the community meeting report, you might have seen that was a concern that was expressed at the meeting by a neighbor once construction is complete. And then to the extent you have questions about elevations, we can address those at the end as well.
Good evening. Thank you. Thanks, Ty. My name is Colin Brock, I'm managing partner of Block Design. I think Ty covered most everything. I think the only points that I would point out is is, as was noted when we originally were talking about the original site plan, as the driveway was located here, there was concern about kind of the view from this curve as it also went downward. So one of the benefits of the site plan, I think, is dramatically improved from not having been constrained by this parcel. So the improvement was moving this driveway here, which was a grading constraint because of this parcel, now is now eliminated, and that allows us to place that there, which gives us a much better visual opportunity, safer opportunity for exiting and entering from that portion. As Ty also alluded to, the parking is split up in a little more cleaner fashion. That out parcel was a little more difficult to kind of work around. With the inclusion of that parcel, it also allowed us to shift the building more towards that east, as Ty mentioned, and that gave us the opportunity to look at how we would grade this in a little bit better fashion. The challenge is, if you all remember, some of you that remember, is we were very close on our tree save area before because of just the nature of the program. And when we had the request to have this construction entrance located there, that kind of prohibited us from meeting that exact 15%. So we put an exhibit together that showed where we would mitigate in the first rezoning, as well as commitment to revegetation. The parcel that is now included, as most of you saw in the aerial, is almost hardly any tree canopy. So that kind of helps, or hurts us rather, with the total quantification of meeting that. So you get more area but less trees, whereas the entire site, as it is prior to, was almost entirely trees. So our percentages were slightly lower, shifting this over and allowing a little bit better circulation, trimmed down a little bit of our available opportunity to save some trees, but with the mitigation opportunities already within the ordinance. What we're proposing is mitigation in this location and some pockets over in this area as well, and then some buffer screening along here if we can kind of work that out from a stormwater management standpoint, because that would be part of the berm. So we'll do our best to look at some screening and opportunity there.
Okay. You guys have any further presentation?
Oh, wait, screen. Sorry. So this is just, I know last time John had asked once before, wanted to see a little bit more clarity on what that buffering would look like. So we went ahead and took the opportunity to show that and where this buffering was. And this was also one of the comments from the neighboring parcel. So the intent here was to look at a vegetated screen that's fairly dense, larger maturing evergreens comprised of hollies, some viburnum, some other kind of ligustrum, various things, as well as something that's aesthetic and nice. We could look at, you see there's the utility pole here, or the utility line here. This can be extended. We also have not had a chance to look at what, we haven't met with DOT to see what their line of sight requirements are, whether or not it'll be a 75-foot line of sight or greater. So there is a possibility we need to pull this a little bit further down.
Okay, are there any questions from the board for Colin or Ty? Commissioner Urban?
Colin, let's go back to the rendered site plan. There you go, stop. There was a mention of the open space, and you can see it behind the building. What is that open space? Is it going to be used for something?
Yes, so the open space requirement here, or not requirement, open space provided here, this will have some grade to it. So imagine this almost like a little bit of a bowl. That's where that dashed line shows. This would be a flat open area. This would be the graded part. The nice part about having removed this driveway from the last location, that was a severe grading constraint of how high this building can go, because we could only make our driveway so steep. And so by eliminating that, that gives us a little bit more freedom to lower this, which does provide, albeit not a significant amount, but does provide this height lower from this vantage point than what was there before. So this has probably, the grade finished floor has probably gone about 5 to 7 feet lower than the original, which I think is nicer. You know, it's not so high on the hill, so to speak. So the anticipation there is open space for gathering events, fields and things like that.
That's what I was wanting to sort of get an understanding of what that's being used for, because if it's just open space, I'd like to see plantings in there from a tree canopy standpoint. But there are two boxes in your working drawing that sort of highlight, they're flanking to the left and the right, or indicating something, and just not tell me what that something is.
Yeah, got it.
Sorry to interrupt. One of the things that we discussed about the use of the building footprint when we went through the process last year is that the portion of the rear is where they would have Sunday school classrooms, gathering space, activities like that. So I think they anticipate that that open space would become an extension of that, a place that worshipers, congregants can use.
And that is what I mean, and so by extension then, let's be cognizant if there's overflow where there's events taking place outside, anticipation of noise and things like that, I'd want to sort of vet that a little bit more and sort of a better understanding. All right, let me go to my second item, is in that rendering, if we look at your parking field, you have basically, for lack of a better word, 3 bays between trees. If you go to your working drawing, you basically only have 2 bays, and you have what looks to be a pedestrian sidewalk connector running north and south through the parking lot. The two don't jive at this stage, I guess. See how you have...
Yeah, the short answer to that is this was done.
John, I'm not sure if I can follow that, and maybe if you could point it out with your pointer, because...
Talking about how this area is slightly different, the parking?
There's a center parking aisle in that particular scheme.
Right here?
With sidewalk connecting the lines, and then their illustrated rendering shows a completely different parking configuration. Or different.
The quick answer to that is when the opportunity for this came about and the intent for the design team to resubmit this, and the timeline in which that was during Christmas break, so we hurriedly put this together. This was before, as we, after the Christmas break, got engaged and started working through the PCO plan, a lot more details started getting fleshed out. So this is the much more accurate representation of more iterations. This was something that we included just as a little bit better, clearer picture than that version. So that.
Okay, so as obviously maybe in a development piece, since it's just a public hearing, that we would get an illustration like you have on the other sheet down, because the nature of the trees, the amount of trees, there might be actually less trees in the parking field now than the previous one because of the configuration. But I just want to be, it's not apples to apples to me. I'm saying a visual difference, I want to know which it is.
Yes. This would be, we can re-render this version. This is the latest and greatest and most accurate version.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Are there any questions from the planning board? Does anyone in the audience want to speak in favor or opposition to this rezoning application? Please approach the podium.
Hi, how you doing? Gina Hoover, 2417 Stevens Mill Road. Okay, first of all, I'll just hand these out. So you can just kind of, I do have it on this if you want it on the screen. Whatever you want to do.
Can we put it on the screen so the public can see what Ms. Hoover's talking about?
You'll recognize the paperwork because it's what they provided for you guys. As they show here, this is the existing conditions. But first of all, I just want to say, Ken and I, we support the temple, but there are a few issues and concerns that we feel that need to be addressed. As where I refer to the O'Toole property, that is now the Babbs property, and that's the former owner. This was the first we've heard about the new planned buffer that they were planning, because we've been discussing with them trying to get something down. And we haven't heard back from them on anything like that. So, but we just wanted to be clear that when all this is cleared out, all that is cleared out, here's our property. We're going to be exposed to all this, 74 down here, the bypass, all this. Our home will now be exposed to all that. So we're concerned with our safety and privacy. And then as we go to page 2, okay, and you'll see the yellow area is the requires tree safe area, which they're going to say, but that orangish red, that's the revegetative area, and that's what they're going to replant. Now, our concern is it's going to take 18 months to 2 years to build this thing, if longer. And that's according to what we've been told. So we're going to be exposed for that long. So Ken and I, we were wondering, if possible, if a 6-foot buffer could be put, a berm, excuse me, a 6-foot berm could be put along there, along here, with trees on top when construction starts to help protect our home. It's just, and then when they do plant what they're planning to plant, it can take 10 years or longer to get an actual adequate buffer. And if you go to page 3, this is how it looks from our front yard. Now you can see what we planted, because we knew one day that would all be gone. And that's the Bass property now you see across the street there. So when all that gets cleared, all that behind there will just be wide open. And our trees have yet to grow, so it's going to be a while before they get up. And so the next page, again, it just shows you how close we are to Highway 74, and how, with all that being knocked down, we're just going to be completely exposed. So, and with the concrete trucks coming in on Stevens Mill Road now, it's just going to be a lot that we're going to have to deal with and put up with for 18 months, 2 years or so. And so that's just pretty much our main concern, is just if we can get a berm before construction begins. And we just feel that's not an unreasonable request. Now for the next page is, during this time, just to give you a little example of what we've been going through, this here is some of the looting and the vandalism that's been going on in the home. And you can just flip the pages as you like. That's a hole in the floor. That used to be the kitchen. Everything's moved. You heard the expression, taking everything but the kitchen sink. So they've taken it. They've taken everything in that house. That's the electrical box that used to be there, and you see parts of it down on the floor. They may have one more. That's what the yard looks like. And then again, there's some more. Windows are taken, have been taken out. It's just a mess. And that's when the front door was taken, and the one down below is when they came and took the storm door. So it's just been a constant free-for-all over there. And what's been upsetting about it is I have constantly asked, when is this property going to be secured? And I've never gotten an answer. And so I finally called Matthews PD and spoke with them about it, and they made it clear that it would ultimately be BAM's responsibility. And I do want to thank Police Chief Rob Kinnenberg. When I spoke with him, he knew exactly the safety issue we had over there, with no doors, windows open, and live wires still going in there, which could spark a fire. So he then had Union Power come over and cut the power completely to the home. So So I did want to thank him for that, for his help on getting that done. But he also recommended that I call Mr. McCoy, which I did, and Mr. McCoy has now sent them a notice of violation letter, and I've been told they are now going to step up and take care of this, which we're so happy to see, because it's been an education to see all these people coming over there and just ripping this place apart. So, but it's just, we need that taken care of, secured, and it's just, we would like to, if possible, get a 6-foot berm with trees on top before construction begins in that area where it's supposed to be planting, if possible, to help protect our home and from the noise and just for safety. And that's just mainly our concern. But in all, we do support the temple. So.
Thank you, Ms. Hoover. Mr. Martin, do you want to speak?
Evening, folks. My name is Roger Martin at 2442 Baden Farm Road in Mint Hill. And you folks, most of you anyway, I'm sorry, probably already know that I developed a goodly portion of the right-hand side of Independence Commerce Drive, some of which I still own, some of which had been sold to other owners. Some of those owners called me about this evening and wondered if they needed to be here. I suggested that they could come if they wish, but that I felt like this was going to be a congenial and positive meeting, and I didn't think they had to be here. I attended the community meeting several weeks ago, a month ago, at the Country Inn and Suites. Coming away from that meeting, I was very and I am very positive about this project at this point. The acquisition of that additional 1 acre made an absolute world of difference to how this project goes together. Given that, and I spoke at length with the owner, the petitioner, and with Ty Schaefer about the project, and I told him that I would be here tonight to support it, which I am. I do still have concerns, and I would hope that as you folks work through this thing, that you could deal with some of those. This is, and I'm on this a bunch of comments, or some comments anyway, and I'm not trying to load up a mountain of stuff, but the first things that some of you probably have figured out maybe at this point is that the site plan, this site plan was drawn to scale, but then it was reduced in order to get it onto the size sheet that is now on display on the screen. What that does to you is that I, as a citizen, without knowing the reduction and all of that information, I can't put an engineer scale on it and determine lengths, widths, etc., depth of parking spaces, and all of the above. This plan that we see on the screen does not jive with, or nor is it the same as the site plan, the rendered site plan, which we saw green tree zone, etc. We can flip back to that when you can see what I'm speaking of. You see tree save area indicated. So as you folks are considering it and coming up with anything that you wish to come up with, then it's my feeling that you should have plans that are the same so that you can compare them. This plan, for instance, shows street trees all the way down Independence Commerce Drive and around the cul-de-sac. It does not show anything screening-wise or additional plants down the common property line with Lot 5 of Independence Commerce Drive, which has already been built on and is used every day by some of those tenants and owners. Going to, I can't tell for sure because of the reduction in the site plan and how that affects it, but it just feels like that there are really a ton of additional trees that are leaving the site, but yet I don't see much revegetation or tree save. It may be intended to be there, but I can't visually see it and understand where it's going to be. The driveway onto the main drive for BAPS, the temple, was in the same location as we see it now, or at least real close. Previously, due to the elevation differences, there was about a 26-foot differential between the pavement on Independence Commerce Drive and the pavement up there, or at least the finished floor level of the building. Currently, there is, I think there's a 6-foot differential between the finished floor level of the building and the point at which the drive reaches the top of the hill and kind of starts to enter that disembarkment area. So what is best, now one of the plans that I got off the computer today showed that there was a 20-foot, instead of a 26-foot differential, there's now a 15-foot differential, I believe. The difference between 725 down on the asphalt and 740 at the crest of the hill where it transitions into the disembarkment area. We talked long and hard about mud in the streets, trucks, etc. Since November, all of the concrete, or at least the greatest majority of concrete, has been poured at the Bainbridge apartment complex in front of Americana Restaurant. They only have about a 2-foot differential between the asphalt in Matthews Mint Road and the pavement on their street going into the big apartment complex. Since November, we've had a very generous amount of rain again this year. And that intersection and all the way to Independence Boulevard at the red light at Wendy's, across the boulevard, and then on down to Wells Fargo Bank has been a mess, a disaster, a muddy path, particularly up in front of Americana, Piccadilly's, the Goodyear store, Wendy's, and that developer has done a pretty poor job of keeping the streets clean. He has been at a disadvantage is because that street right through there has got curb and gutter all the way, and so there's no place for the water to go except into the stormwater system or down the driveways into Wendy's, into the paint store, into the Goodyear store, and then people are carrying it back up the hill into Piccadilly's and Americana. So that's just an example of the muddy, total mess. I've been through there with a clean vehicle. I run 2 miles an hour. I get over into the farthest part of the lane if there's no traffic coming in violation of the law, so that I don't have to run through that muddy mess that's there. So with only a 2-foot differential, between Bainbridge driveway and the street, you can see how much mess comes out of that site. You can only imagine how much mess is going to come out of this site with a 15-foot differential. There is no place to stop that. At least not all of it. You can stop a little bit of it at the top of the hill by taking it into that detention pond, which of course will lead to cleaning that detention pond out before the job is done. But there's that's about 100, and again, with not knowing the scale, I don't know whether that's 160 feet or 200 feet. So there's a goodly distance that when it rains hard, all of that stuff's going to be coming down the hill. There's no way to stop it. Assuming that it is used for a construction entrance. My sense, we have additional property in the back. Since there is a long, lengthy distance of 300 feet at least, haven't measured it, on the rear on Stevens Mill Road now, there are side ditches back there to where they can put the straw, round straw bales in the side ditches. They can put erosion control, silt fence, whatever they need to do, and to catch that wash off that the trucks are going the water trucks are going to create when they're washing those streets. So you can get it off the pavement, you can keep it out of the parking lot, you can put it in the side ditch and give it time to settle. You can clean those side ditches out if you need to. If you run the construction trucks up and down that tall hill on Independence Commerce Drive, that muddy water has no place to go except down the driveway on the 2020 and 2032 Independence Commerce Drive, and then into the driveway at 2040 Independence Commerce Drive, which is the final lot on the back of the property. It's either got to go down their driveways or it's going in the storm drain, and you've got no way to clean at least a part of that storm drain out except just run thousands of gallons of water in it. If you do that, if you run it in there and then you flush it with trucks and trucks of water, then all of that erosion, all that silt is going to go all the way down the common property line at the end of the cul-de-sac with Lot 5, which is already built, and their new detention pond area. There's a storm drain that runs right down that property line. It then drops about 15 or 20 feet into the wet basin area at the bottom of that hill. So that's where all the erosion is going to end up going if it goes in the storm drains. So you've got your choice of where you handle that nasty water in. Again, I want to support the petition. They were able to do great things with the acquisition of that additional lot, and we're happy to have them as neighbors.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant like to address either Ms. Hoover or Mr. Martin's comments?
Just really briefly, thanks to Roger for his comments, which I think good at proving some of the difficulties we've known about this site all along. There are just topography issues galore here. Lots of challenges that the applicant is going to have to work through this process and continue to work through as they try to build it out. And we'll continue to talk with Roger about that and get his thoughts. I do want to respond really briefly to Ms. Hoover's comments. I've been in communication with Ms. Hoover, and I will continue to be in communication with Ms. Hoover. We will work through those concerns to the extent we're able. We'll continue to do that throughout the process. But I do want to give some perspective on the condition of the property, which was brought to BAPS's attention Sunday a week ago. I think when we first appeared before the board last summer, the mayor had mentioned that it would be a lot easier if you could acquire that parcel on Stevens Mill Road. And I think I said it would. Those communications have not been fruitful. It finally happened, and As part of that long process, BAPS have tried to be incredibly sensitive to the former owner's personal condition. That included letting him stay on the property that was his home, to be able to remove things that were of significance to the former owner. And it became clear to us when Ms. Hoover shared the photographs that that privilege was abused. And so in terms of stepping up and taking care of the situation, BAPS have. And that Monday started the process of doing what needed to be done to find someone who demolished the home, inform the former seller he could no longer be on the property. So I want the board to rest assured that BAPS are not happy with the situation either and are taking all necessary steps to address it. Happy to answer any questions.
Any additional questions from the board, or the planning board? I would like just to make one comment. I would suggest that when you come back for us to vote on this, that your maps are equivalent in all the renderings.
And in fact, we can share maps before we come back before you.
All right. I'm sorry.
Did you offer that to the fire department as a controlled burn or training opportunity?
We did not.
Is that something you would consider?
Yeah. Nick, do you want to? Yeah. Nick Patel is with BAPS.
Good evening. Name is Nick Patel. I represent BAPS. So yeah, I actually spoke to a couple of GCs for demoing the house, and they actually suggested I speak to the fire department. So I do have an allocated time to call them tomorrow, and if that's something they're interested, definitely we're perfectly fine with it. But we will get it taken care of, as we were brought to our notice last week. Was just being mindful to the owner and having them, take his time moving things out, but thinking he was going to trash the property and leave it that way, but it is what it is, and we'll get it taken care of. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, there's no further questions. This will go to the planning board and come back to us on April 13th. I'll entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
So moved.
Second. Planning board.
For clarification, the planning board will be the 24th of March, and this board will come back to us on April 13th. I'm sorry, who made the motion? I did. Okay, Commissioner Whitley made the motion to reconvene the regular meeting. Commissioner Urban seconded it. All in favor? All opposed? We're back in our regular meeting. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 10, planning and development business. I'll receive a report from the planning board. Mr. Weezer.
No,
I'm sorry, I have two different agendas here.
This should go real.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I have a planning board report from our meeting on February 25th. We have three items on the report. First one is text amendment application 2019-705, APC Towers LLC, request to modify maximum stealth tower height in the industrial district with adjacent to residential zoning. There's no changes since the public meeting, and the board recommended approval and vote of 6-1, as the request was found to be consistent with the Matthews Land Use Plan, as it allows for the integration of a stealth communication tower on any industrially zoned site that will be a service to the community. The request was found to be reasonable because there are limited locations where a stealth tower can currently be located within the town of Matthews and will require co-location of additional antennas. The second item is zoning application 2019-708, Cultural Family Properties, 2447 East John Street, I-1CD, change of conditions to allow for the placement of a cell tower. Once again, there were no updates since the public hearing, and our board recommended a vote of 6-1 to recommend approval of the change of condition, finding the request was consistent with the Matthews Land Use Plan because it allows for a stealth communication tower in an industrially zoned site that will be service to the neighboring properties. It is reasonable because the property is underdeveloped and is in the back of the property away from the public realm. My last item is request for reapplication, Home Depot, 1837 Matthews Township Parkway. Our board recommended approval of the waiver for the one-year resubmittal period for Home Depot in a vote of 6-1, and requested the submittal be filed within 30 to 60 days. And that concludes.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Dave? Dave, I understand if we vote in favor of our consent agenda later tonight, you'll be leaving the planning board and joining the Board of Adjustments.
That's what I understand also.
So we would like to thank you. How long have you been on the planning board?
Well, I did my two years terms, and I believe I filled in for about another year, so it's been about 5 years.
How about a round of applause for... Good job. We're not going to let you get away. You're going to have to go to the Board of Adjustments and do some more work.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the planning board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 11B, number 1, zoning application 2019-705, text, to change the text to UDO section 155-506.41C5 to amend the height allowance for stealth communication towers in I-1 zoning district from 80 feet up to 120 feet. Mary Jo.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Since the public hearing, there have been no changes to the text amendment request. As Mr. Weiser said, on February 25th, the Planning Board did recommend approval of the text amendment with a 6-1 vote. Again, this is for stealth communication towers in industrially zoned properties adjacent to residential properties. Any questions?
I have a question. Staff has a concern, and I know we discussed this last time, is there a way to do this for this particular piece of property and not affect others in the town?
No, sir.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mary Jo? Commissioner Miller?
I think it's probably the same question, but I'll ask it and then have a follow-up. Can all light industrial therefore be 120 feet tall if approved?
It would be stealth, and it would be adjacent to residential property. Currently, our ordinance allows up to 220 feet, but that is not adjacent to residential properties. And with that being said, you still have to have your fall zone. It has to be in a certain area for that. But this would be in any I-1 zoning district.
Do we have any identification of other properties zoned I-1 near residential?
Yes, and we mentioned it at the public hearing. There were the properties, the Williams Business Park along Matthews Mint Hill Road, just down the street to the right. There are properties along Monroe Road that are adjacent to residential neighborhoods. And I believe that's the ones that we have.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Glenn? Sure. Commissioner Bland, do you have a question? Would you like to share?
No, I think
Would anybody care to make a motion?
I would. I'd like to make a motion that zoning application 2019-705 be approved, has been found to be consistent with Matthews land use plan. As far as it has allowed the integrity of the stealth communication tower on the property zone industrial that would be a service to the community. Additional Matthews Unified Development currently allows this use in the RI zone. The text amendment is reasonable because there is limit to location where the stealth towers can be currently located within the town of Matthews and require co-location and additional antennas.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Whitley. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Bland. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Irvin?
I will just go on the record. I'm not going to make a substitute motion or anything like that, but I don't have a problem with the cell tower being on this piece of property. The problem I have, and we've done this several times before, is a text amendment. The text amendment is a blanket statement across the town. We looked at the maps for the I-1 against residential properties, and they're all within a stone's throw of Town Hall, where there's a lot of residential development, or future residential development. And thereby, I can't support the text amendment because of what I consider an injurious blight on downtown in an I-1 zone this close to Town Hall and residential development. So I will not be voting in favor of this text amendment.
Does anybody have any further comments?
Just discuss.
Commissioner Blunt?
What chapter? What, I think that's correct, I'm saying that.
Mike Donovan?
Is it? No, thank you. If the town decides to approve it with respect to this particular piece of property, I understand it affects everyone. Is that all the properties?
The text amendment affects all I-1 zones within Matthews.
Within Matthews.
So across the board. It could be applied across the board.
So we can vote on that tonight if we want to. That changes it for everybody. Is that what you're saying? Correct. Okay. But then next meeting, if we change our mind and said, that really may not have been what we wanted for everywhere else, we could go back and change it at the time if we chose to do so. Is that correct?
You would have to go through the process of the text amendment change. Yes,
We can do that.
Yes, but
Okay. So if we thought that this make good sense here, okay, but it might not make good sense somewhere else, then we could change it so that it wouldn't apply.
but that property would be non-conforming then.
But then they wouldn't change it. Why would they change it? They might.
We wouldn't have to change it.
They would have to.
They wouldn't have to change it, but
Right.
they couldn't, they would not, they would have to apply the non-conforming rules. Which would mean there's a section of our ordinance that discusses nonconformities and what they're allowed and allowed not to do. So
How would
that,
that affect?
if there was an act of what is called an act of God, a tornado hit the tower and tore it down, they could rebuild it. If they wanted to change the, say they wanted to, in structures, if you wanted to increase the footprint, you wouldn't be allowed to increase the footprint.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that it would really affect a tower, but.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Miller?
Thank you. I don't have any problem with it on the Cashel property, but I'm afraid of the unintended consequences in other parts of the town, near residential. So I'm afraid I won't support it just because of the unintended consequences.
Commissioner Willie?
Mary Jo, if anybody else applied, wouldn't they have to come to this board for approval?
They only have to come for site approval. And it technically has to be approved because it's an allowed use.
Okay.
So anybody else could apply and you'd have to approve it.
I'm going to support this text amendment for this simple reason that I've had a multitude of our citizens in Matthews come to me and say they can't use their cell phones. And I think that's a public safety issue. Many of our citizens no longer have landlines, and that's their link to ambulance, police, fire, EMS. So for safety, I think in this case, safety, I'm not a big fan of how the towers look either, but for safety purposes, I think it's important for our citizens to be able to use their cell phones. And so for that reason, I'm going to vote in favor of this. Is there any other discussion? All right, motion was made by Commissioner Whitley, seconded by Commissioner Bland. All in favor? All opposed? So it passes 5-2 with Commissioners Miller and Urban in opposition. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 11B2, zoning application 2019-708, the Cushell property to change the conditions in that certain R1 CD district located at 2447 East John Street and being the Cushell Family Properties LLC, and further designated as tax parcel 215-05125 to allow for the development and construction of communication facilities. Mary Jo.
So this property had originally been zoned for some 4 out parcels that would have been used for warehousing. Now the applicant is requesting a 120-foot stealth tower. There was no changes since the public hearing in February, and the planning board recommended the changes be approved 6-1 vote.
Any questions for Mary Jo? Do I have a motion? Commissioner Miller.
I'll make a motion to approve 2019-705, or 708 rather, change in conditions of 2447 East John Street. And that it's allows for an undeveloped portion of property to locate a stealth communication tower that will be of service to the community, especially in safety. And that the rezoning is reasonable because there are limited locations where a stealth tower can currently be located within the town of Matthews. It will require a co-location of additional antenna, and public view of the tower will be minimal, hence the stealth.
You said that so eloquently. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner McCool, seconded. Okay. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 11B3, administrative amendment for 630 Matthews Township Parkway, former Rite Aid. Mary Jo, you popped it up.
You're stuck with me a lot tonight, sorry.
Good.
So at the January 13th meeting, Keith Corporation presented a request for conditional note change and elevation approval. There were several concerns by the board at that meeting noted about the elevation, and a 30-day deferral was sent. 30-day deferral request by the applicant was approved by the Board of Commissioners for this evening's meeting. The applicant has sent final elevations. They include the additions of awnings. This is the John Street side view. These are awnings. You can see a better picture of the awnings up here. Some trellises, for lack of a better word, up here, and some greenery put along the side of the building. Again, this would be along the side of John Street, facing John Street. This elevation is facing Matthews Township Parkway. Again, they've shown the addition of awnings facing that and some additional windows, spandrel windows on the front of that elevation. The rear toward Aldi's and side toward Covenant Day Cemetery is basically the same. As noted before, they have gotten rid of the drive-through window and will use this as a employee entrance. Any questions?
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I seem to remember us suggesting Colonial or Williamsburg or something identified for this.
They were trying to get away from that.
Yes. That is.
We are, they are. They did a good job. I just don't see anything in Matthews that looks like this. And if we're trying for consistency, man, I don't know where this is.
Commissioner McCool.
Kind of to go off of that, it's, you know, when Monroe turns to John Street, that's the beginning of our downtown Matthews, and this doesn't really flow. It's kind of a sharp difference between, you know, the buildings after that. So I don't really see how this goes within, you know, kind of our streetscape, what we're wanting to do as a town.
Mary Jo is the applicant here.
Yes, it is. They are.
Mayor, other questions, Commissioner Hoodley?
Go ahead, John.
I mean, in having conversations with petitioner, one was that trying to get away from the stigma of what is a Rite Aid building. And the Rite Aid building had a sort of colonial-esque Williamsburg look to it. I did state that I didn't see this as a gateway type building, but I think they made a lot of effort of giving it a uniqueness or a quality to it that it's not going to stand out as, oh, former pharmacy, I get you kind of thing. I don't know that we need everything in town to be consistent. I will say that the career rules in effect is an all brick building from that aspect of it. It is different, there's no doubt about it, but I think the moves they made helps and benefits it. It's definitely more modern from that standpoint. If the board really wanted to stage a very traditional colonial-esque conversation, they probably should have mentioned that to the petitioner. He probably would have taken a different tact.
That is part of their request, original request to take that note off of the plan, and that is what Aldi did before also. They took that note off the plan.
Commissioner Whitley, did you have a comment?
Well, it was pretty much the same as what I think John, Renee, and I both met with the petitioner, and we didn't like what was there, and they did come back by our recommendation to bring some of these on and make it look more appealing because it was the gateway. And I think they've done a real good job of sprucing it up. I was on the planning board when it first came to it, but now I know they made a lot of changes from that time to now. So I'm in favor of the new drawings, what they got in there.
Commissioner Miller.
Do the awnings on the second floor or above the windows, do those serve any purpose?
They're there for architectural.
They're very awning-esque.
Awning-esque, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Does anybody on the board want to address the applicant? Have any questions? Does anybody want to make a motion?
Good, okay. I will. I'd like to make a motion that 630 Matthews Township Parkway be approved because of the support the economic availability of existing development, the elevation and removal of driveway to the facilities, and to provide an update look to the existing structure. And it is reasonable because it is repurposing a vacant commercial building with the use allowed right to the district and support non-residential mixed use. It is the public interest and provides additional medical services within the walking distance of downtown Athens.
Do you have anything else, though? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion made by Commissioner Whitley, a second by Commissioner Urban. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes 5-2 with Commissioner McCool and Commissioner Miller in opposition. Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 11B4, Administrative Amendment, Creek Bend Subdivision Elevation Changes. Rob Cliff.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Oh, okay. All right, sounds good. All right. The developer of Creek Bend subdivision is requesting an administrative amendment to change elevations for the development per rezoning conditions that were approved when the rezoning was approved August 14th, 2017. The elevations originally approved with the rezoning did not include 3-car garage models, but the proposed elevations include 2 models with 3-car garages. The average heated square feet is roughly the same between the old and the new elevations. And no changes have been made in the overall development in the subdivision itself. The revised elevations are in reaction to a change of builder from Bonterra Builders to Century Communities and the addition of 3-car garage models to the portfolio. Additionally, there are to be 8 side load garages, side load models in the Creek Bend subdivision, and I'm gonna just run through some of these here real quick. So these are the previous Bonterra elevations.
How many 3-car garage, do you know?
There were none in the Bonterra. 2 models in the proposed.
How many houses out of the 24? You know that?
I do not know. I understand that there are some additional elevations that the applicant is proposing in the area tonight. Okay, so this is Bonterra. Going through here. And then this is the change. This is the Century Communities models. Get to there's a 3-car model and another one. And there should be be happy to answer any questions that the board may have of me. Again, the applicant is here as well.
Any questions for Rob? Okay, would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening, board. Appreciate the opportunity to come speak before you tonight. I want to recognize the new members that are here that were not here when we came here 3 years ago. That's a testament to how sometimes much time and effort it can take to make a living doing this. But let her bring up my presentation here.
Do you know how many of the homes will be planned to be 3-car garage?
We do not know yet.
Okay, just whatever the customer wants, is that how you do it?
That's correct. And I'll start by saying, since that seems to be the only issue focus, when we made the first presentation to the planning staff and to the board at the time on this first rezoning, my actual presentation did show Bonterra models with 3-car garages. That was a part of that presentation. We'll show you some of those tonight. But for some reason, and it may have to do with what they actually had on their plan sets, the plan sets that they use for their customers, with most builders, this is an option. And so I think in the case of Bonterra, their original plan sheets did not show that option on it, even though in the actual photographs that we showed, we saw that a number of times. The basic history here is we obviously put the property under contract back in 2017 with the rezoning from R15 to RBS, granted in August of 2017. We signed a contract with Bonterra in November. We finished final construction plans in May of 2018 and started site work in June of 2018. Bonterra was purchased by Taylor Morrison Homes in August of 2018, just after we started construction. We ran into a really difficult winter in 2018 and again in 2019. So Bonterra elected to pull out of the project due to the issues that they have with regards to not having Bonterra site plans in their portfolio any longer and not being able to fit onto the property. The related architectural conditions, I won't go through reading all these, but the most significant one is the third one. Applicant may subsequently propose additional conceptual schematic images of the front elevations of the one-family dwelling units to be constructed on the rezoning site. And such additional conceptual schematic images must be approved by the Matthews Board through this process. We went into a process of evaluating a few other builders that are in the community. We selected Century Communities because they're active here. They have a plan offering that's very similar to what Bonterra's was. Again, as you've heard, we're maintaining the basic site plan, essentially the same, with the same almost 40% tree safe. We're maintaining the commitment to the side loads and the 8 side loads, commitment to the on-site trail network and the trail net connection to the park. And as I said, Century has a track record here of building quality homes. Idlewild Village Towns and Matthews at Harmony Towns are 2 of those projects. So I wanted you to see, and this is not, again, the exact ones that were submitted, but these are examples in real life of those models. This is the Bridgeport, and there's a couple, 3 elevations of that in here.
homes.
Excuse me, for the benefit of some of our newer board members, can you tell us where this development is planned?
Oh, sure. So we are on Idlewild Road, right adjacent to Idlewild Road Park. We're on Irwin's Creek. Actually, the creek takes a 90-degree turn at the back of the property, hence the name Creek Bend.
Hence the name.
This is the gardenia. It's one of the ones with the 3-car garage. This is the hibiscus. It's the second one. This is Townsend. This is a side load version. The Kensington. And the wisteria. So the comparable architectural elements, we're using the same cementitious board and batten siding and also horizontal siding. Plentiful usable front porches on these plans. There are dormer and accent windows similar to what was on the Von Ter models. Alternate use of shingle accents, generous stone and brick accents, professionally designed color palettes, and clipped front gables and corbels. These were some of the Von Ter elevations that were shown in the presentation when we were rezoned. Just so you'll have an actual live view comparison. So with that, I'll leave it if there's any questions.
Any questions from the board? Commissioner Urban.
I met with the petitioner. We talked about this, and I get it. I know when a builder drops out, you got to scramble to find another builder to take down the lots and do some things. I did, and I was very honest with them. There's a richness to Von Ter's, the mix of the materials, 2 or 3 materials in each thing, the details, very well put together. And Von Ter was a builder that was sort of set up for that. Now Century is a different animal. Century's larger, that they can't operate in the same market realm. So I think most of the elevations are fine, is what I indicated to them. I just told them that I really have a problem personally with the gardenia and the hibiscus because they don't even exude the sort of richness that even the other elevations that Century was portraying. It's just far too plain Jane, too much in your face. That's all right, sort of. But go to the gardenia one. I think there could be a little bit of, there you go. That doesn't rise to the same level of caliber of the other elevations. And so I think with some work, it either gets dropped out or it gets embellished a little bit more, but I get the switch, and so I'm willing to, let's make the switch and go from that aspect of it, but maybe the type of house plans get mixed up a little bit. And I think the other piece is the 3-car garage component to this is really what's dragging your eye into this thing, and setting you up to the ultimate snout house. It's like snout house extra.
So 2 of the representatives for Century here, we would like them to speak to the differences that they might be able to make on that plan.
I mean, bottom line is, you only, how many lots? We're talking 30-something?
29 lots.
See, 29 lots. So, I mean, how much product do you need on those 29 lots? You know, 3, 4 house plans mixed in, flipped back and forth, side loads. Well, actually 8. So you're down to 16. So how many products do you really need? But I just have a concern about the gardenia. And I'm only one of 7. But that and hibiscus don't seem to rise to the richness that you have in the wisteria and the other plants. And so, you know, these are just faces. And, you know, you could look at some of the characteristics of brickwork and carry over to gardenia. But
is there any willingness to drop those 2 plans from your application?
I'd have to get,
I think we would rather try to fix them up somehow by meeting with you guys, just because this is a product that I think one of the ones that you have that's, I guess, a live shot, it's sold. So, I mean, people do buy it. One thing we found is a lot of people have 2 cars and they're putting those actually in the garage instead of on the pad, which is kind of, you want to have 3 garage doors or you want to have 2 cars possibly in the driveway. So I think we can find a compromise where maybe, I think we're planning on doing the first 2 lots when you drive in the neighborhood are a side load. And there's a huge berm. If you drive by this, there's a huge berm. So you're not really going to see into the subdivision, I don't think. So I think we can, I'd like to keep those in there. I think we can kind of makes them. Changes, modifications, and then the renderings never look as well as they should. Sometimes I think black and whites look better, just so it's kind of hard to give a lot of pop on that. But
Are there any other comments or questions from the board or motions?
yeah, and I'm with Century, and Drew Rouser is my name, and that's Phil Hayes. I think he introduced himself.
Would anyone like to make a motion? Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the elevation change request for Creek Bend subdivision, that they're appropriate. And do I have to do the big long thing?
Yep.
Let me ad-lib this. It's appropriate in that it provides a variety of housing styles that Matthews needs, and it's consistent with our land use plan and other housing developments in the area.
Well, you got to give something more reasonable.
And it's reasonable because it's appropriate. And it's reasonable. One thing we didn't get was a price change on any of these before we vote. We may want to know, because we talk about affordable housing, but 3-car garage homes are a little bit more pricey than 2.
I will point out that 2 of the plans that are, and I'm not sure where we're in, are 1-story or 1.5-story option. Here we go. So that's Wisteria is 2757, and the Kensington is 2243. So I think on a square footage basis, you would have a variety of price points, but certainly as you go up to 3,000 square feet or more, you would have a higher price point.
Is it $100 a square foot? Should we multiply that times 100?
Keep going.
No, I can tell you that his lot price has not gone down in 3 years, so we'll start there. No, and a ranch actually costs more per square foot to build because the foundation is so much larger and you don't have a lot of heated square feet above it. But, I mean, our price points would probably be $350 to $450. So, probably average around 4, and then folks can option up as much as they want to. So,
Okay, well, I made the motion. I haven't heard a second.
I did not hear why it's reasonable.
Can't think of it for $300,000-$400,000.
I'll second the motion. Well, we need to have a reasonable statement.
If I may, I can assist with the reasonableness. I have some ideas, and you can see if you like them.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. That it's reasonable because the home sizes are very similar to what is currently approved. Same architectural elements are proposed.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I think you got to talk about
Okay.
Okay.
What he said. He said.
And we have a second from Commissioner Bland. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? That passes 6-1 with Commissioner Urban in opposition. Let's move on to item 11B5. Consider request to waive the 1-year waiting period for resubmittal of zoning application at Home Depot. Mary Jo.
In December of 2019, the Board of Commissioners denied the change in use conditions request from Home Depot. With that effect, they have a 1-year waiting period, just as any rezoning would have. So they are requesting to submit revised plans to the board prior to the 1-year waiting period. Planning Board reviewed this last month and voted 6-1 to allow them to have the waiver. If the waiver request will allow for staff to continue working on the site plan and have them to come into compliance with the UDO and provide more desirable result for the town. So they do have sketch plan that they have provided that is not the final, but this is something that they're working on. I will let you know that if the waiver is not approved, they do have to come into compliance, which was the reason for starting the change in conditions, because they were sent an NOV. And then they would have to wait till December to submit again. Applicant is here.
I'd like to just make a comment. I participated with some others at the Tree Charlotte event, and 2 people came up to me and were disappointed that they could not rent large equipment. 2 Matthews residents were disappointed that they had to drive to Rock Hill Home Depot to get the type of equipment they needed, which was previously available in Matthews, and it increased their rental time from 4 hours to 8 hours. So the one gentleman in particular was pretty angry that when he went to Home Depot, he said, "How come I can't rent this?" And they said, "Go talk to the town. Go talk to Mary Jo." So, I personally think we should try to accommodate them in a better looking spot, but I'd be in favor of this request. Is any other discussion? Commissioner Miller, you can make a motion.
No, I have a question. Okay. I believe that is the theater, is that correct?
That is correct.
And on this, it shows parking here, but where are the outbuildings?
Those are over here, in this area, back over here.
So over here are
Over
the
here.
seasonal outbuildings?
Yeah, they're the sheds you're talking about?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah, those are over here on this side over here.
Are those allowed? Or is that another wink and nod?
So that is part of associated sales, and those do not take up required parking spaces over there. We, as staff members, Mr. Camp and myself, we have been discussing changing some of the text possibly to accommodate this concerns with Home Depot and their competitor.
Okay.
So.
The only objection I really have is that, if my memory serves me correctly, the adjacent property is Steinmart. And to go from a clothing store to, a bulldozer or a backhoe is a little bit of a shock. I wish that they could have the more industrial stuff deeper into the property. That's just my opinion.
Any other comments, Commissioner Urban?
No, I'm just going to go ahead and make a motion, because we're just talking about them allowed to reapply.
Correct.
So, let's go ahead and make a motion that we allow the change in condition for the reapplication for Home Depot at 1837 Matthews Township Parkway per Mary Jo's letter dated March 9th, 2020.
A motion made by Commissioner Urban, seconded by Commissioner Bland. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
My wife, thank y'all.
She wants to rent tobacco?
She said, leave Home Depot alone.
Let's go on to agenda item 11B6. Request for fee and lieu payment reduction at the villages at Idlewild. Mary Jo, my goodness, I think you're setting a record for presentations tonight.
This is it, I'm done.
All right.
So, the Unified Development Ordinance requires that all single-family development has to either commit to 4 acres of dedicated land for park use in Matthews, or provide a fee in lieu for the Parks and Recreation. So at all pre-submittal meetings, planning staff reminds developers of this potential, of the requirement and the potential fees. We give them an estimate. Once the zoning goes through, we provide them with the accurate estimate, because sometimes those things change. So on May 28th, 2019, application 2018-691 for the Boyd Funderburk Drive, which is the project at Idlewild and NC 485, was rezoned from R15 to RBS and R15 CD and B1 CD. There's 3 parcels, and they were approved for townhomes, and a portion was approved for commercial uses. The applicant received an estimate when they first submitted the rezoning for the fee in lieu for the townhomes, and that was estimated at $84,733.69. After the original fee in lieu estimate, Mecklenburg County Tax Assessor Office did reevaluation of all properties within Mecklenburg County. And the land value increased substantially along with the fee in lieu. On December 6, 2019, staff supplied the developer of the Villages at Idlewild a revised fee in lieu of $327,916.48. There is a process in our UDO that discusses if applicants feel that they disagree with the fee in lieu that has been provided to them. So this is what we're here for this evening. Mr. Todd Akers of K&W Commercial, representing the developer, has submitted a request for reduction of the fee in lieu as presented. As part of the approval, or as part of the process, the Plan Review Committee shall make a recommendation on the land value to the Town Board of Commissioners within 30 days, and we have done that. The Plan Review Committee reviewed the appraisal that was provided by the developer and had some concerns regarding it, and those are here in our notes regarding this. Two of the sale comparisons in the appraisal provided by the applicant were from 2017 and 2018. The Plan Review Committee felt these are old comparisons because they were before the most recent revaluation for Mecklenburg County. Site number 2 that was referenced in the appraisal is not located near NC 485, and the committee felt that was not a fair comparison because of the distance from the subject property. Sites 2 and 3 are in Union County, where land value is typically lower than in Mecklenburg County. The appraiser reduced the value of the subject property by 10% because currently no public utilities are at the property. The current homes on the property are served by well and septic. However, the developer is building the site with expectations of water and sewer being installed. Mecklenburg County Tax Assessor Office has stated that the most recent revaluation was not contested by the property owner when they received the values. And they also have said that they appraised the land with review of sales for land that are comparable in size to the subject property. They do what is called an arm length sale review, which is they look in the area and see what comparable are up for sale. They do not reference a sale that is a developer to a developer or a developer to a contractor. So the board, what is the request this evening is to review the appraisal that has been included in your packet, the PRC, and direct the PRC or staff as to whether we should have a third appraisal done or have another appraisal done that is agreed upon by the developer and the town. The appraiser, the current value on the tax assessor's rolls this was the original estimate that we provided in November of 2018. This is the revised plan, and it's $1,690,890. And the current appraisal that was provided by Mr. Aker is $774,000, which reduces the fee in lieu down to $150,000. The applicant is here. Any questions, concerns? I'll be glad to answer what I can.
Well, Mary Jo, I called you on this afternoon, and I think perhaps if it was within, in sight of the Mecklenburg County Tax Assessor's estimate, then it might be reasonable, but a 65% reduction is unreasonable, and I would support having another appraisal done to get it more in line with the Mecklenburg County tax assessor. I think we have a fiduciary duty to the citizens of Matthews to not allow a $170,000 cut. I don't think this, the appraisal that was submitted by the developer is reasonable. That's my opinion. Anybody have any comments? Commissioner Miller?
Thank you. I understand your point, Mayor, but as of November 2018, it was 24,000 an acre, 25,000 an acre, and the third option has it double that, or almost double that at 45,000 an acre, and also about double the fee in lieu of 150,000. So I would be open-minded to the compromise of the 150,000 fee in lieu versus the initial one of 84. It's almost double. I'd welcome any other comments.
Commissioner Urban?
So are we saying that the applicant is willing to commingle with the town and getting a third
Yes.
appraisal?
That is, it's up to the board to do that, and yes, if the board says that's what they want, then the applicant will have to pay for it. And we did discuss it with him, and he did say he would be willing to split the cost with us. He is here this evening.
So we're talking between the 150 and the 327 number, probably, in that aspect of it. So it may be no harm, no foul, if it happens, or the appraisal comes back to Mayor Higgins' point, a little higher, and there's a win-win.
I think it's a reasonable compromise.
Thank you. Mary Jo, the board is not bound by this third appraisal, correct? The board can, or I'm looking for clarification on that. Is that any kind of binding on the board if they get this this extra appraisal? And I guess my follow-up question is that if the developer is going to pay for it, does the developer pick the appraiser?
No, the town shares the cost with the new appraiser, and it is agreed, the appraiser is agreed upon by the town and the applicant. The last part here.
Commissioner Miller, to your point, the December 6, 2019 Mecklenburg County tax assessed value is 1.7 million.
I agree.
Can we just discount that?
There's no
Maybe it's
water or
high.
sewer in the area, and a year earlier, it was, I'm just saying that a year earlier it was 84,000, and the third one is 150. That's almost double it. I just don't want to take advantage of anyone.
So, point of clarification, so that 2018, that's actually a 2011 appraisal. So we were in the midst of recession.
Correct.
We went through a second appraisal, it's probably 2012. But just know that number is actually 7 years old in the midst of a recession that we climbed out of, and the community feels all the effects of that, good and bad.
Mary Jo, did the applicant appeal the 1.69 valuation?
No, the tax assessor's office said that no one contested or appealed the reval.
Commissioner Gould?
I think the board owes it to the constituents to just go ahead and do the third one. I don't see any hurt at all.
The applicant is here.
Sure.
He would like to speak.
Come forward, state your name and address, please, for the record.
Todd Akers, 1018 Deckman Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28226. So I appreciate Mayor and Commissioners for taking this up. One of the things I do want to point out is the facts, as Commissioner Miller had mentioned, is there is no water and sewer to this property. There is no water and sewer that's going to be given to this property from Mecklenburg County. And Union County has said that they will not service it with water and sewer either. So you're sitting with a property that has well and septic. I would like to introduce Mr. Weidenkoop, who is, has the credentials to do the appraisals, which is who we hire.
Sure.
For the record, my name is Damon Bidencope. I'm an MAI. I hold appraisal certifications in 3 states and have appraised here in Mecklenburg County for almost 30 years. I live at 2500 Montrose Court in Charlotte. I've heard a lot of conversation about the tax value. I think if I could mention a couple of facts that I really believe are very pertinent. You heard the factual basis that there is no water and sewer to this property. That is what I understand as a fact, and that was a fundamental element in us performing the appraisal in my firm. The other thing also is that the property is under an agricultural exemption on the tax rolls, which means that the significant amount of the tax burden that would normally be associated with value is deferred. And when I looked up what the actual tax bill was for this property, it was about $4,000 or $5,000. Because there's a tax deferment on the property, the actual bill and the burden paid by the owner of the property is very small, and it doesn't become worth their while nor feasible to appeal. Also, if a property owner is considering selling the property, they're not going to appeal to drive their value down and possibly hurt their deal on being able to sell the property. What also happens, and it's the same with religious properties with churches that aren't subject to tax because they have exemptions in place, the actual assessment amount that they arrive at within the assessor's office is fairly insignificant to the ongoing nature of it. In the same way, if you have an agricultural exemption, it's also insignificant. I know a good bit about this because I sat on the Mecklenburg Board of Equalization for almost 10 years and sat through the 2 prior revaluations of 2011 as a sitting member, and also in 2002, 2003, and also consulted with the Pearson Company when they came in to fix the 2011 revaluation. Also, in way of background, my firm completed the commercial data study for Mecklenburg County that Ken Joyner, the assessor, and Christy Landis, the deputy assessor, and Scott Hudson, who headed up the revalue team, used as a basis for some of their modeling on the commercial properties. I think that it's an absolutely fundamental fact, without this being with sewer and water. And a couple of other comments that I would like to make.
But sir, why this memo we have, that alters the value by 10%, and you're 65% lower.
No, sir, it doesn't. If I could, I would like to address a couple of the comments were made, because in the performance of our work, where I heard some comments that they didn't particularly like where these sales that occurred happened, you have to go to where the sales have happened because they are the sales. Some of the sales that would have occurred in 2018 would have been used in the January 1, 2019 revaluation because they occurred exactly during that 17-18 period, which was prior to the revaluation which was being set, which was a value relative to January 1 of 2019. It wouldn't have included any sales later. So to say that the tax office included sales later is rather erroneous because it wasn't within their scope or the facts that they would have had to decide what the assessment is. One of the other factors when you look at the assessment record on the Patriot card for this property is that there is no adjustment made to this property for not having utilities and not being serviced. It's fairly much a blanket acre statement at about $98,000 an acre. The difficulty is if you've got property that's under an interim or agricultural use, you're going to cap out at maximum agricultural production, maybe $15,000, $20,000 if you're absolutely lucky. Yes, this property is in pending path of development, but 485 is a man-made barrier that we have created by development and is obviously posing difficulty for the town to service with utilities. So if you look at the property that sits along the Mecklenburg County border that's directly outside of 485, you'll see very limited development in most places along that border. And this is simply property that lies within that. To believe that this property is similar to properties well within 485 that are eminently able to be developed, I think is a little bit of a fallacy. In justification of the Union County sale that's further towards Union County that we did use, it was a consideration that the path of development would take some years, 1, 2, 3 years, for more development pressure to reach that particular property. And And that's why we felt it was pertinent to use in comparison, because you've got the same situation where this property, factual today, is not serviced by sewer and water. So that's another factor to look at properties that have the similar development timeline in front of them at being able to be developed, and why we use that as comparison. I'll be happy to talk about any details here, but this report was done with as much knowledge, as much disclosure to arrive at what we believe the true market value of the property is. It wasn't some arbitrary thought process, and of the criticisms I've heard, I don't know anyone who's licensed within the state to actually perform appraisals, or by statute 93E. And it's what I do, and I've done for 30 years, and we do it as an independent valuation firm.
But sir, I suspect the county tax assessor is competent to do this sort of analysis as well.
But only on a mass appraisal basis.
Okay.
And the point with the assessor, with being a tax-deferred property, is that it doesn't get the focus of a property where the actual tax burden is linked with the value, because so much of that tax is deferred. So when you look at the actual burden of what the bill is that's paid, that's substantial. And
Surely you can understand my concern when you're
Oh.
65% less, and I represent the people that live here and pay taxes, so
Oh,
we have to consider it. So let's just get another appraisal, and you may be correct, and we'll just see. I'm sorry, Commissioner Mazzulli.
Well, you brought up something earlier, as you said, you know, we want to believe the Mecklenburg County tax appraisal when it helps us, but when it hurts us, we're not going to believe it. That, I mean, that's just, you can't believe something when it only helps you. And I think at the cost of the taxpayer, I just can't stomach that at all. I would not be in supporting the current appraisal.
You're talking about the assessor's appraisal, or you're talking about the report that we've produced?
The report that you produced.
Yeah, I think
the one where it's 65% less than what the county believes. I don't know,
Right, but I think that the underlying fundamentals of the lack of water and utilities are fundamental and factual, without any debate.
You very well may be correct. Let's get a third appraisal, and if you're correct, then we're not attacking you, sir, or your credentials.
Well, I've heard a lot of review criticisms as though they have credentials to do so, but
I
I
believe
understand that
you're highly educated and competent to do this sort of thing. Let's just get a third appraisal, that's what I'm saying.
Well, anyway, they're my comments about the appraisal. I'm happy to field any questions
Any
about
further
it.
questions? Commissioner Miller?
If we've already got 3 on this paper, can we call it the 4th opinion? We have current, we have the tax reval, we have the appraisal, the third appraisal, and isn't this new one that we're going to get a 4th?
No, we only have just the appraiser that was just done, and then tax reval. The other estimate that was done was just based on the land valuation of at the time. So there was no other appraisal. And there was also a question about the decision of the supplemental appraisal shall be final and shall be certified by the Board of Commissioners within 30 days of receipt of the final appraisal.
Did Mr. Akers, do you already own the land?
No, sir.
So it's under contract pending zoning, et cetera?
No, the rezoning has already taken place. It happened May 29th of 2019.
So I guess I was confused. I was thinking that the first table was the purchase price and things like that, but it wasn't.
No,
It was just an estimate.
It was an estimate that we provided when the developer came to discuss with staff about a rezoning.
And the second one is the reval, and the third one is the new appraisal.
What the new appraisal would come out to, yes.
I'll support another appraisal.
Okay, is that a motion?
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
it's reasonable.
We have a second? Second by Mayor Pro Tem Garner. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mary Jo. Jay, can I ask you how long this item 7 is going to take? Because I'm about ready, I think the board's ready for a break.
Why don't we just take a break, Alan?
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break, thank you. Agenda item 11B7, consider response to the North Carolina General Assembly's proposed bill to reduce development regulations. Mr. Kemp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You all almost escaped hearing from me this evening. I come to you, this is something that happens every spring. General Assembly, before they convene, are always wondering what changes are being proposed. You may have seen an article that's been circulating over the past week or so. There's a new House committee entitled Local Residential Permitting and Planning. Is being chaired by Representative Mark Brody in Union County. We expect that committee, or according to the article, there's going to be new legislation introduced in April, which we think could have a pretty significant impact on conditional zoning and other work that we do. This isn't conjecture, this is a big guess on what this bill may contain, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background information. Since 2010, General Assembly has slowly and deliberately, and intentionally, I would add, eroded local control for local governments throughout North Carolina. This is preemption. This is state law nullifying the potential for us to have local ordinances. And I pulled, and really the breadth of this, when you go back 10 years, I pulled some examples for you of what has occurred. There's some that are more well-known and not. We've had bills that would have done things such as remove our ability to add bike lanes to streets. That one didn't pass. The inability for us to charge a fee, a small fee even for business licenses, that was several years ago. There was a bill that I think since has been reversed that limited communities to the ability to provide broadband, particularly in rural areas. That later was changed. Some larger examples of removal of local control have been an attempt to put the Asheville water system into a regional authority. That was eventually overruled by Superior Court, or North Carolina Supreme Court rather, as well as the attempt to convert Charles Douglas Airport into a regional authority as well. Locally, we've had attempts to remove the ability for us to have tree ordinances. Stormwater measures have been changed, which now preempt us from requiring stormwater for pre-existing development sites. And when sites redevelop, we can't require them to provide stormwater, which essentially lets the site have runoff in perpetuity when you look at it from that perspective. Billboards, we currently, and the mayor just sent a letter, a stronger rebuke rather to the some of the proposed changes to billboards. But over the past several years, these changes keep coming with larger and larger tree clearing areas to really protect billboards. This new change would allow potentially the replacement and upgrade to digital for billboards in Matthews, which have been prohibited since 1988, so a long time. There's been changes to cell tower legislation, reductions into the amount we can hold for bonding, and finally the cherry at the top was the Zoning and Aesthetics Bill of 2015, which limited our ability to have design criteria for single-family townhome development. So again, it's been 10 years, it's been a long 10 years, there's been a lot of things. Just a few quick things I found doing some research for this evening. There was a League of Municipalities survey a few years ago that said 78 or 79% of citizens preferred local control. They want their local government to be in charge of development regulations. It's very important. And I also found a lot of trust in local government. We've got 500 municipalities, 100 counties in the state, so this sort of one-size-fits-all approach to legislation we don't think is a good fit. And I don't want you to feel like we're sort of jumping too far ahead here, but I wanted to give you a heads up. We have signed up for the email updates for this legislative committee that's convening pretty soon. But again, these are it's a major concern to us because Matthews has been engaged in conditional zoning since, Charlie, 80 or 81 now. So it's been about 85. So it's been we're moving 86. We're moving towards 40 years. I think you all will know this has been it's been a very helpful tool to us. And some of the language in the article, and these are quotes from Mr. Brody that say, if you give people the okay to build, don't put other conditions in that are over and above what is required. Well, if you read the tea leaves here, we already can't regulate architecture in single-family or unified development ordinance. If this legislation would tell us that we also can't have conditional zoning notes that regulate design and other things. What tool does that leave us when a new subdivision comes in and we want to have a conversation with the neighborhood about aesthetics and subdivision design? So I'm raising this as an issue right now. We're not asking you to take a formal stance because there's nothing to take a stance on yet. We just wanted to make you aware. I'll be back in front of you as soon as we have an update. We'll talk to the mayor and the manager about getting an item on the agenda to give you another update on it. But
Are there any questions or comments for Jay? I think it's pretty well known where I stand on this. I think the General Assembly continues to erode our ability to enact local ordinances, and at some point, you might as well not even have local government, just let Raleigh run Matthews. And we're being a little facetious there, but we're headed down that path. So I want to stay on top of this and let our legislators know that we certainly don't support this continual erosion of our ability to do the business that we were elected to. Let's move on to the consent agenda. I believe we're the consent agenda now. We need to take an item off, item G, because I believe Mr. Weiser would be on two different boards at the same time. Is that what it is?
that's correct. We want to make that item his appointment to Board of Adjustment effective April 1.
So I will entertain a motion to remove item 12G from the consent agenda and just add it under new business or unfinished business.
So moved.
All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Now I'll entertain a motion to address the consent agenda, item 12A through F.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda A through F.
Second. Motion's been made by Commissioner McCool, seconded by Commissioner Miller. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's go to unfinished business. Consider a request for ticket and merchandise sales at Fullwood Theater, Our Lady of Fatima Rosary Group. I'm pronouncing Fatima.
That's going to be me. Mr. Mayor, members of the board, this was tabled last meeting. On your memo is the different, whatever charges that this group would charge to the folks that came. We are, typically we don't get involved in what ticket prices are. We are recommending approval of this request.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this. I don't think I'm the one that raised the question.
That's correct.
Because they did not show it as the other group did, but I had the opportunity to see what that price is. And I make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
A motion made by Commissioner Whitley, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Garner. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. So we're going to put Mr. Weiser's appointment under new business 14G. So we'll go on to new business A. Consider downtown mobility plan and parking study. Dana.
Good evening.
Good evening. You waited a long time.
It's all good. Okay, so thank you for having me back tonight. I'm going to do a very, very brief presentation on the downtown mobility plan. I want to first thank Rob Jasek, who came and spoke. He was a committee member. He came and spoke several hours ago, but I do want to thank him for his participation, even though he had to leave. So, just to remind everyone, the intent of the downtown mobility study was to evaluate pedestrian bicycle infrastructure throughout downtown, to look at parking issues, parking opportunities, and really make the community safer in its connections to businesses and homes throughout our downtown. So we had a pretty robust planning and public process. This is the flow chart of things that we did. So in 2019, in March, we kicked off. It's been about a year. And so we're looking towards adoption and ultimately implementation of this plan. Implementation will come to you all basically this is an action plan, and then each project would come to you all individually for action and funding, because this is not a funding document. So what public process did we do? We had a 3-day public workshop. When we kicked off the study, we had stakeholder and steering committee member meetings, which ranged in agency partners, EMS, neighborhood leaders, business owners, the schools. We had a lot of input. We had online input. As well, we wanted to try to engage people, not just face-to-face, but also online, because we know some of our younger folks like to engage that way. So we did have online surveys as well as an interactive map. We went to Planning Board as well to give them an overview, but our Transportation Advisory Committee was the group to make a recommendation to you all. So you'll see that they did recommend approval of the plan as a strategy, but the TAC requests to see each individual component before planning, funding, and approving projects. So again, just a reminder that each item will come back to both, I guess, the TAC as well as the board. Board of Commissioners, you all heard this several times. Last month you heard this, and we did have public comment. And I just want to make sure everyone's aware that we met with everyone that had public input at the meeting. So all the speakers, we had a meeting, I believe it was last week, to follow up and to hear everyone's concerns. So this is that cool public input map that we had online. And it really showcases the Trade Street corridor as where the primary concerns are. So as those bubbles got bigger, that's more and more people put their dots there. And that's really where we focused, the consultants focused on their recommendations. So, we have the recommendations, and I'm just going to go through this again, very high level. We had pedestrian recommendations, we had street transformation recommendations, bikeway recommendations, parking, where to put parking and how to implement parking. We looked very high level at transit, and then we had a lot of programs and policies to support the document. So this is Trade Street. We've got, here's Town Hall here. Here is elementary schools on this side. North End is down here. And so really a lot of the detailed designs came from the Trade Street section. We have a lot of robust recommendations throughout the planning area. But I do want to bring your attention to the 100 block of North Trade Street. And when we met with some of the folks who had concerns about the planning document, I think it all came down to parallel parking recommendation on Trade Street, that they really liked their pool, diagonal parking, and they felt that it was right for that area, and they didn't want to see that changed. And so while I think folks may be uncomfortable with some small aspects of the plan, I think this was where we understood and heard them, and we gave you all some options for the in the board memo if that's what you all want to do. Also, the planning document did address, like I said, the parking and how to deal with parking and parking management. Some folks would like us to jump right to building a deck, but there's a lot of things in between building a public parking deck and managing sort of parking districts, and there's all these steps. And as a taxpayer of Matthews myself, I would love you all to look at doing more than just doing a parking deck. I was educated on the strategies to develop parking and helping parking become more successful in our town. And this is just some 3 projects that are potential near-term projects. We've got West Charles Street here that could pick up, I'm thinking that's about 30 spots. I cannot see my number. This is about 40 spots down this is in between the post office and Pita Kebab. And then North Fremont Street, that's about 50 spots. And these, again, I highlighted in a previous presentation. Instead of doing a parking deck, which is about $20,000 to $30,000 a spot, this would spread out parking throughout the town. And some of these are low-hanging fruit. So the town the town parking lot here would be more expensive. But West Charles Street and North Fremont Street, I think, would both be lower hanging fruit for the board to consider. Ultimately, tonight we'd love to see action if you all see fit. Again, the Transportation Advisory Committee did make a recommendation to approve the document, and then we have 2 options for approval. Obviously, you can create your own option, but the first option is recommending approval of the plan with the understanding that policies and programs and projects contained in the study will have to be analyzed on their own. And number 2 is recommending approval of the plan, but removing the plan's recommendation to replace the angled parking to parallel parking on the 100 block of North Trade Street. It is an intent for all of the projects and programs and policies to be considered on their own as well. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Commissioner McCool.
Just a quick question, with the 100 block, with the parking in front of where the watch repair and AAA collectibles, is that affected at all with this?
No. So,
Okay.
yeah, the one that's facing John Street?
Yeah, the one that's, because that's the diagonal.
That's
Okay.
not
All right.
within the scope of this.
Commissioner Glenn.
I was just, I've caught a lot of heat down, talked to a lot of different people who are up this 100 block of Trade Street, also who were opposed to that, but also, I'm sorry. But also, with respect to on Wall Street there, that's beside the Weaver Bennett Bland and Portrait Gallery and Floor thing, and all the people that are all on that side there, turning that into parallel parking there, making basically 3 or 4 parking spaces out of what's 10. And that's parking is a premium right there.
And I think that the difference is that on that side is only 3-foot sidewalks. That those sidewalks are so incredibly narrow that I really think something has to be done. I think there's a difference between what's on Trade Street and what's on East Charlotte. I hear you, and that's fine.
It's not the people that don't have a place to park, then they don't have, that's the issue. All of those people are very concerned about that. I'm not at all supportive of that. Anyway.
I have a few issues with some of the things that are mentioned in this mobility plan, but since we are stating that they'll be each considered separately as separate projects and fully vetted and analyzed before they're implemented, in general, I can support it. I do support removing the parallel parking on the 100 block for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, it really upset some of the business owners there. Secondly, I don't think parallel parking is viable there. I don't think you can be turning off of John Street left and have someone in the middle of the road parallel parking for 90 seconds or however long it takes. That's how long it takes me in my truck, I can tell you. I don't have the button you push and it just parks. So I just don't think it's viable. I think it'd be a traffic hazard. I think people be running into the rear end of folks trying to parallel park. It's much easier just to pull in angle parking. So for that reason, I will support this with the very strongly worded statement that each one of these projects will be fully vetted and brought before this board before they're implemented. Can we also somewhere in the motion say that this will be a living document and that we can change it moving forward, that this is not written in stone how we're going to design our downtown? I'd like to see that this can be occasionally updated as plans change. But that's where I stand. I think this board owes it to the business owners that were so adamant that they really don't want parallel parking there. And they have a lot of other issues, but that was the one thing that was really what's the phrase in their craw?
They're the same people that you're talking about, the same ones that don't want it up and down Charles.
I would like to, you guys may hate me for saying this, because I wholeheartedly support this mobility plan, and I think there are a lot of great points, but I've been taking my time going through it, and before I say whether I support it, even though I feel like I do, I'd like 2 more weeks to just finish going through it page by page, knowing what I'm getting behind when I do support it, so that when people ask different points that actually
So
pop up.
are you making a motion for deferral?
Yes.
Okay. A motion for deferral on this for 2 weeks. And second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Bland. I guess for the benefit of Commissioner McCool, and we have a tradition or a resolution to honor any commissioner that asks for a deferral, that we give them the respect of the deferral.
A gentleman or woman's agreement.
Gentleman or gentlewoman's agreement, correct. So with that being said, we do have a resolution. That's correct, Commissioner. All in favor?
I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
No. You can't afford
I need to go to I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a piggyback comment on that. I know you mentioned folks. I was going to engender the same conversation, but I've been in several meetings before the sun even comes up, and I don't like meetings in the dark, with property owners. And one thing that struck me, and I didn't realize it, when you look at the stakeholders list, there are no property owners in that stakeholders list. I think we did a little bit of a injustice there, not talking to property owners. And in thinking of the policy statement, I get it, I understand it, policy, high level, it's adaptable, it's changeable, it's livable, breathable. But I think some of the concerns of property owners were that somebody comes into town, reads the policy statement, and they take it, unlike we take it, they take it as a matter of fact. And simple things like, you know, honestly, do you really think you're gonna have a railroad tunnel underneath the tunnel, underneath the set of tracks? I mean, should not obviously been a quick phone call to CXX? Is that possible or is it not? No, take it off the policy. I think there's some hits and misses in the policy guide that we need to address, and I think that's why Renee wants to go through it a little bit. I did receive this morning, after a meeting with some property owners, I said, look, I get it. We all agree that the mobility study was good. We all agree that we need the mobility of bikes and pedestrian and cars and flying vehicles and the whole nine yards, and they get it. They get that. But I said, you can't be opposed to everything, so tell me, what is it you want? What do you need to do here? So I did, as of today, get 16 megabytes of files sent to me about, well, these are things we have concerns about. And you may have addressed them, I don't know, but I want to lift them up, and then you can tell me, well, yeah, that's in the policy, and well, that diagram is a little misleading. We could fix that. And I just want to take that time. We're going to defer it. I'll get you the information.
Please do.
And we'll go through
Yeah,
that aspect of it.
absolutely.
I just think, I think the one part about it, there are 5 or 6 individuals in this town that own the bulk of the property. And I only know one individual that was engaged in the conversations because he just bought a piece of property. But the other ones have owned all this property, and they felt left out. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we owe it to them to have that conversation. And so after all is said and done, I like the idea of the deferral.
So I urge each commissioner to read the plan. I've read it more times than I care to, but I'll probably read it again as well. If you have any suggested tweaks, bring them in 2 weeks.
Are we doing it before 2 weeks? I encourage you all to send them to me, your comments.
I will I have them, I will put them in a spot, and I will send them all to you.
Okay, thank you.
And then you can respond accordingly to those
Absolutely.
particular items.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Dana. Let's move on to item 14B, consider 2020 planning conference to-do list. Hazen, what?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, so the last 2 weekends ago, we met and talked about, or had a planning conference, and we came away with these to-do items. These are for the board's consideration and approval, or change, or modification. These are the things that we did hear from you. I will say sometimes it's hard because you don't vote on everything, so there's like, at some level, the staff is trying to read the tea leaves of what the consensus of the board is. So, you know, it's whatever best process we got. Happy to answer any questions or anything that needs to be clarified for the board.
Commissioner Willie.
I called Hazen early this evening, and one of the things we talked about was affordable homes, and that was number 4 on our planning conference when we went to the plan, but it's not even on this, and I wanted to be on here because I think before we left, Mayor made a comment that he wanted to make sure that we did not just push this to the side. We want to move forward. And I know we talked about Davidson, and also we talked about Mecklenburg partnership as well. Those 2 affordable home projects that I would like for us to put back on here. I looked at this, there's a couple of things that can be combined together. Number 2 and number 3. Let's talk about Cresthill and Charles Street can be combined together because both of those really is talking about the same thing, getting GPS and also further study on that, and that way we can put affordable homes there. And also number 7 and number 31 can be combined together, and that's where Mayor Pro Tem Renee Garner was talking about the ASC. Those 2 can combine together, and they'll shorten those 2 total lists down, but at the same time we can put that back on this list so that we can have that on our agenda moving forward.
So a quick response, Commissioner Whitley. So number 17 talks about bring in UNCC Urban Institute to make a proposal to the board on housing needs and strategies reports. That's, in my mind, exactly, I don't know who Davidson used. Do you know that?
That is who Davidson used.
Okay, so that's exactly our intent on that housing and affordability piece. I think what I like about that is instead of just having this broad topic about affordable housing, all right, let's see what I would call experts say, and then I'm thinking it's going to be some kind of how-to plan to take it to the next level instead of us kind of running around hit and miss and thinking what's going to work. So in my mind, I feel like number 17, whatever fits what you're talking about. I'd like to hear do you disagree?
I do disagree because the planning board proposed a couple of years ago on affordable homes, and at that time that board did not recognize they heard it but didn't do anything about it. But I think this board, when we was at the planning board, we all talked about it, and I made a couple of presentations that we would look at the Davidson model and also consider the Charlotte Mecklenburg. And I like for that to be indicated there. We can still keep 17. I don't have no problem with that. But I think specifically, I think the question was, and Hazel, I think you asked it, did we want to take a trip to go see some of these places? And I think we said, yeah, that would be good for the board to take a trip to see Davidson and maybe some of these projects here.
So one of the things we did, the staff did, is there's different things that didn't make this list of 32. For instance, schedule a Saturday morning meeting to talk about the CIP. Remember, we talked about the CIP, but we didn't kind of make any firm decisions. So we have a list of smaller items, and one of those is schedule a 5:30 meeting with the Charlotte Housing Partnership.
Okay.
So I would caution the board. I mean, Carrie's here, did great work. We really appreciate your leadership on that. But I would assume he says, look, this is a layman doing a work that's highly technical. I would advise the board to bring somebody in here that does this a lot, and it's part of their profession. It's not going to be free either, by the way, but that's why I would recommend we focus on UNC's Land Use Urban Institute to pull something together and really give you guys a very thorough deep dive into housing and affordable housing amenities.
And mine is this: we got 2 projects local in Mecklenburg County that we can look at. That's in Mecklenburg County. I'm not opposed to 17, but I think that we proposed something that was good for the town. Let's put it on there. As I showed where we can combine two different projects together to move space. So it's not adding, it's just combining those two to come together. And we'll still be within 31.
No, we can have. There's no limit to the number.
Okay. In deference to Commissioner Whitley, let's add it. Is that all right with everybody?
What's the add?
The add is that we look at those projects that we talked about, Davidson and the Charlotte Mecklenburg House. I know you said we having a 5:30 meeting, and that's fine, but I like for it to be on the to-do list, and then we can check that off when we do the 5:30.
You're talking about the
Charlotte
Mecklenburg we want to look at?
Yes, that's correct.
So,
and did you see something about Davidson?
The board
a memo today?
What I sent today is the housing studies that Davidson had completed.
Okay. So, Commissioner Urban.
I just want to be clear that just because we're visiting these locations does not mean that we're moving forward with this kind of approach. I think one of the underlying tones we have here is that we, as a town, do not have an affordable housing or an attainable housing policy. So we haven't even laid the groundwork yet to decide or look at where we need to be in this context. And I think the conversation about Davidson was good. They have some initial policy items that we can lift up, but there's a whole gamut of things we need to be going at. So I don't mind visiting properties. But I think we need to set the groundwork first before we're off spending money, or thinking we're spending money, or think we have money to move forward.
And that, I think that was our whole intent, is to get the discussion started and get the boys looking, looking and seeing is believing. And I think that's part of the concept.
Well, and there's a lot of underlying tone, looking and seeing and believing, there's a lot behind it. And I think what Hazen was trying to do with the ULI and things like that is there is the whole, the whole high-tech world is a totally different animal, and we need to be careful with it. It's a big education process, and we just need to set that groundwork. I mean, Kerry started it with that whole discussion, gave us lots of options. There's a lot more options as well from that aspect of it. We need to sort of have some grounding before we get too far away from the dock and start drowning.
Oh, there's no harm to go look and see what.
No, absolutely not. I have no problem.
We're just looking. The benchmark.
Just kicking the tires.
That's it. That's it. Okay, anything further on that?
I'm good.
Planning conference to-do list, thank you, Hazen. We'll move on to 13C.
If you want to approve.
I'll make a motion that we approve the 2020 planning conference to-do list.
Second.
So 30, with the motion you're making to include 33, that is to look at Davidson and Charlotte Housing Authority, including site visits.
I don't go ahead, 33. I made a point that we can't combine, and I think Renee's, those two could go together, and then it'll move a space. You got two things here that's saying the same thing, number 3 and number 2. That's the same thing. It's on the same discussion. You can make that one.
Let me just, it's not a big deal. So we can combine, but it is also easier from a staff perspective to segment out specific items so that CJ and Public Works can run on the road, and then Maureen can run on the ways. So what you're proposing is not a bad idea, but also what we're showing in a itemized, segmented way, I think helps from a staffing. Okay, Maureen's in charge of number 3. So if you make the motion to combine them, that's just my feedback as an manager.
All right, well, now let me ask you now, number 7 and number 31, and I can ask Renee that. Now, you got both of her looking at the ASC wrapping the lecture boxes with artwork, and then number 7 is Commissioner Renee follow up on ASC to bring the cultural feature to Matthews. Could that be combined this morning?
Yes, that would be.
Because I don't want to look like we adding something to the.
Well, there's no limit to how many we can have.
I know it, but it's just, when looking through this, I see some things that's like, you're talking the same thing.
All right, my motion is to make the combinations that Commissioner Whitley suggested, along with adding the last item, which is look at Davidson and Charlotte Housing Authority and possible site visits. Do I have a second?
I'll second
Yes.
that.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Garner. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. Okay. With the town manager in charge of something. Let's move on to item 13C, consider purchase of vehicle mitigation barriers for public safety. Captain Toro.
Mayor and Commissioners, thank you very much for taking the time to talk about something that I feel is very, very important to the safety of Matthews and especially our street festivals and many of other events that take place in the parks and towns that have increased vulnerability to either an unintentional or an intentional vehicle attack. So we've been looking for the last couple years at different vehicle mitigation barriers that are out there. We've decided on what we believe is to be the most viable product to provide the level of safety and security that will greatly enhance what we're currently doing without publicly getting into some of our weak and vulnerable points. There are some that we've identified through study that is actually quite concerning to us. So started looking at what different products are out there. We looked at 3 different types of products. Two of them are currently being used by the City of Charlotte and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. One is a little bit older of a system that was very heavy, big, cumbersome, and difficult, really didn't work for our type of situation in street festivals because we have to reopen and open the streets for things like the parade and 5K races and Sunday church traffic to allow the vendors to come in and service overnight. So we've got a lot of opening and closing of streets here, which pretty much brings us to a new solution that's come out. Charlotte is currently using this one, and it's what it allows for is to give the protection for the streets. So if a vehicle was to come straight into a closed festival area, the vehicle will be basically lifted up into the air and completely taken out of commission and unable to continue any further and penetrate into the festival area. This is a patented system that is, we have a sole source letter from the manufacturer, the local United States distributor for this particular product, and it suits our needs to be able to create that safe area that people can be out in the streets. Again, this will be for our street festivals, Beach Fest, Matthews Alive, any other street festivals, but we could also use it at a smaller capacity of just blocking off the park. For instance, Stumptown Park for Food Truck Fridays, Symphony in the Park, 4th of July, those types of events, as well as anything around the town green that is occurring, either like chamber events and things like that, where we have street closures and the ability for a vehicle to come into the congested, populated areas of the festival goers.
All right. Any questions or motions, Commissioner?
Do you have any photos of this?
We do, and I apologize for, they weren't in the original packet, but as we put this, as I was kind of getting things together tonight, I thought it might be good to provide something that can illustrate better than I can describe.
Because in the description, you say that one man can lift it up. I'm picturing the plastic barriers or cement barriers. The plastic ones can be filled with water or sand.
Right. So these are based on physics. They're not based on weight. What it does is you can see that they're assembled on scene, and you can move them in and out of the roadway, so you can pre-assemble them while you're preparing to close the street and have them all pulled off to the side of the road. It also allows you to open and close the street. You can quickly open it to allow emergency vehicle in if there was an ambulance or something that needed to respond inside the festival area, or a fire truck or something like that. One or two people can move a section out of the way and allow that vehicle to enter, and then reclose the section right behind it. Also allows for the different servicing of the vendors and to accommodate for things like the parade at Matthews Alive and those types of things.
What would stop, if it was a two-man operation or a three-man operation, terror, what would stop a pedestrian from pushing it, sliding it open while a vehicle came?
If you in the top left picture there, or in the top two pictures you see there, there's a mechanism that they use to actually lock and unlock. So you would unlock it, and then it makes it possible to move, and then you lock it back into place with the locking mechanism.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I would just like to say that unfortunately I've seen enough vehicles running into events like Matthews Alive on TV that I think we owe it to the people that attend events like that to purchase something like this and do our best due diligence to make sure some idiot doesn't come run over our visitors to our town. So I'm in support of this. I entertain a motion.
Can I ask a question? How many of these are we talking about buying? Maybe how many of them?
To close both ends of Trade Street, McDowell Street, and Sadie Street, you actually have to purchase 72 individual units, and they link together. And that will cover all of our roadway entrances. If events grow or things like that in the future, we need to add pieces to it, you can just keep adding on if you need to. But what's proposed in front of you is enough of the barriers to close all of our existing roadways that come into the festival area, the lanes of travel that is. And then the storage containers and the trailer that actually, so we have a place to store all these units and keep them in good working order. And then efficiently to deploy them out, all we have to do is go hook the trailer up, pull it out to the site and deploy.
No, I'll wait to. We'll do motion one next time.
Just point of clarification, for whatever reason, there's no budget amendment in the packet, or we didn't get it on the agenda, for whatever reason, so we're just going to do motion number 2. Motion number 1 will come back, budget amendment next meeting.
Commissioner Urban.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion, motion number 2, to authorize the police chief to purchase a complete MDB-3X system that is quoted from Advanced Security Technologies using the existing tourism budget funding. The amount's still good? $213,275, as outlined in the memo dated 3/3/2020 by Chief Clark Pennington.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Urban, second by Commissioner Whitley. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. This year's still up. Stason,
Yes.
consider purchase replacement police vehicles.
Unfortunately, this year, we did lose 3 vehicles out of our fleet due to due to traffic crashes that completely totaled the vehicles out. These are just things that are difficult to predict. You can go many years without losing a vehicle in this way, and in this fiscal year, we happen to lose 3. What we did is we went back and looked at our fleet and identified some more higher-priced vehicles by the way they're equipped, which are the patrol SUVs that have full patrol equipment in them, the prisoner partition area in the back, weapons mounting systems, and all these different types of things. We could take 2 of those vehicles that are currently being used in specialized units, which is our training division, and move those vehicles back into the regular fleet. If we could replace those vehicles with less expensive pickup trucks, the utility type truck would suit the needs of those positions and allow them to still be fully functional. So it's a reduced amount of overall pricing for us to not have to purchase a fully equipped SUV. Put those back in the patrol fleet.
I will entertain a motion.
I have a question. Hazen, does this number 1 apply to that budget as well? So we just do number 2?
No, sir. The budget amendment is attached here, so you can do motions 1, 2.
Then I'll make a motion that we approve budget amendment prepared for chief police for the purchase of 2 vehicles to replace the 2 or 3 total loss vehicles during fiscal year 20.
I have a second.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Whitley, seconded by Commissioner McCool. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. We need another motion.
To approve motion number 2?
Yes. Commissioner McCool.
I'll make a motion to authorize the police chief to purchase and acquire 2 vehicles to replace 2 that were a total loss during the fiscal year.
Second.
All right, this time Commissioner McCool made the motion and Commissioner Whitley seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Congratulations. Drive safely.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's move on to item E. Consider contract for sidewalk repairs. CJ, aren't you glad you're at the end of the agenda?
Yeah, apparently there's one more after me.
There is, but I mean, hang around until 10 o'clock.
Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for staying this long to listen to me. As we talked about at the planning conference, except for Commissioner McCool, this is maybe new to you, so if you have any questions, please ask. We had a consultant come look at the sidewalks in the downtown area. They surveyed approximately 4.25 miles of roadway in the downtown area, and in that area they found 903 trip hazards. Those are areas where the sidewalks are roughly a quarter inch or more in elevation difference. That opens up liability to us if we don't get them fixed. We could do that with our own staff, but it would take a lot of time to take out and re-pour all those panels of sidewalk. There are some that we would like to do, places where there are true roots that we want to bridge over. That way we don't shave it off and it comes back in another month. What we'd like to do is a combined approach, have the consultant use their proprietary technique to shave off the smaller trip hazards and the ones that won't come back. And then we would go back with our own forces
those other segments of sidewalk. The estimated cost from the original contract was $67,550. I'm just going to go ahead and use that as a not to exceed. We're expecting that to come in less since we will be doing some of the sidewalk ourselves. But what we would like is for the board to approve us to move forward with that contract and then modify it as needed.
What is the protocol for how high that will shave off versus that will replace the whole panel?
So they, up to about an inch. Once you go beyond an inch, then you start having issues with this, with the structural stability of the sidewalk. Most of them are 3 inches or 4 inches. Some of them aren't 4 inches thick. So about an inch is most we would like to go that way.
This is an aesthetically ugly solution, but it prevents trip hazards. So it doesn't look very nice.
It'll blend in after a few years.
All right, any questions for CJ?
I just wanted, CJ, the sidewalk on Crestdale, you know, where they dug that, whatever it is, you filled it in, but the rain washed it back out, and there's no barriers or saying sidewalk, but I think you need to put something there just so somebody walking through. There's a big hole on both sides of that.
Is it,
you know what I'm talking about?
Is it where the consultant came, or where the contractor came and put in the
That's
concrete?
right.
For the fiber?
That's
We'll have to back out.
right. That's right. You filled it in, but it's washed out with, I guess, the rain, but there's nothing about it. Let people know that they sidewalk needs some kind of cautious sign.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and put a cone out there and get it fixed.
Okay. Can we make a motion? I'll make a motion. Commissioner Miller.
I'll make the motion to allow the town manager to enter into a contract with Precision Safe Sidewalks to repair the sidewalk trip hazards in the downtown area. And we would appropriate not to exceed $67,550 from the general fund balance to fund the contractor's work.
I'll second.
Motion made by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Whitley. Any discussion? Commissioner Urban?
No, I'm ready to vote.
No discussion. All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, CJ.
CJ, talk to us about. Sorry?
Yeah, that combined.
We're going to move on to item F, floor maintenance to Levine Senior Center.
So the Levine Senior Center gets quite a lot of use. The flooring is starting to become worn and needs to have something done to it. So typically what we do is strip the floor, reapply polyurethane. One of the issues with that is the time it would take roughly 3 to 4 days to do that. And then you also have the VOCs, volatile organic compounds, that are given off. And we're afraid with some of the clientele that goes there that their breathing may be affected by that. They didn't come back with another option. Is unfortunately a more expensive option. It's to put on, it's called Rubio Monocoat. It gives off no VOCs. It will go down in approximately 2 days, and you're ready to go. The one benefit of the Rubio Monocoat is that future installations, you don't have to strip it and redo it. You can just apply it and blend it in. So future installations will be less expensive than putting down polyurethane.
All right, any questions or motions?
Quick question, how long does it last?
So it depends on the wear, the amount. They're saying probably 2 or 3 years before they have to reapply. But
It's compared to polyurethane?
which would probably be closer to the 5-year range.
Commissioner Urban.
CJ, just for giggles, we moved past this. Why aren't we looking at an LVT or WPC floating smart core product or something like that? I mean, there's no reason to have that floor the way it is. They're not playing basketball. So we could cover it with a more superior product and walk away and have warranties, commercial, 10, 15 years.
So the easiest answer is I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
But we would be happy to look into other things. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many other commercial products out there. We're putting a Band-Aid on the surface that's not designed for folks to be using it the way they are. So many other products, so.
Well, and we do hear there's a lot of problems with the building. I don't know if y'all have heard that from Dawn. Do you have a ballpark cost of what you're talking about?
those run $1.50 to $3 a square foot, and you double it for installation, so $6 a square foot.
Significantly more than 16,000.
I know that room is, what, 2,000 square foot room?
They're doing the entryway plus some of the room that you're talking about. We can go back if you want me to bring this back.
CJ, can we ask you to go back and make sure, look at some of the, specifically, you want the, take final?
I can get him information. I mean, there's multiple grades, and you can decide, and flooring people come out and give their best recommendations, but I'd rather have something on warranty for 10, 15 years, and that's somebody else's problem.
We installed that product at Combraco and Pageland, and people track copper and brass chips on it, grind it into the surface, and it looks new after several years of installation, so it gets pretty tough stuff. So, maybe come back to the next meeting?
It's 2 weeks. I wonder, with everything going on, can we get something back in 2 weeks, or should we ask for 30 days? It's nothing that's hard enough.
Let's say 30 days. Let's say at the April 13th meeting. Sure. Is that good? All right, thank you. Now we need to address Mr. Weezer's appointment.
Well, it's several items. Appointments to the board of justice, board of justice.
Yeah, that was moving an alternate to the, Jay, you gonna do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the staff recommendation is to move Aaron Baggerly, which is currently an alternate on the Board of Adjustment, up to a regular member to replace Jeannie Moore, and then to appoint Mr. Weezer to an alternate position effective April 1. He intends to tender his resignation from Planning Board on March 24th. As I've mentioned to a few of you, we're having some quorum issues on both boards, and we're just trying to make sure it can work. We do have some folks we're trying to line up for interviews for Planning Board for you all here in a few weeks.
Do we have a motion, Mayor Pro Tem Garland?
I'll make a motion. I don't know what to say.
The lady's appointment will be effective immediately, and Mr. Weezer will be effective March.
Okay. I will make a motion to move Aaron Baggerly to a regular position on the planning board, or Board of Adjustments, to replace Jeannie Moore and to appoint David Weezer as the alternate. Effective April 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second. Seconded by Commissioner McCool. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. I believe we're done. Is that correct? Down to the mayor's report? All right. Mayor's report. I've got one quick item. Here lately, it seems like, every other day or so, I'm in some sort of meeting with Chief Pennington and Chief Kinenberg. I think we're going to do it again on the March 12th Crown Point Elementary Art Show. And if any of you guys can make that, it'd be appreciated. It's from 5 to 6:30. I didn't go last year. Did anybody here go? John, did you go? The children really love, for some reason, seeing us show up. I'm not sure they know who we are, but some tall adult in a suit. So, certainly like seeing the police and fire folks there. So again, it's at Crown Point Elementary from 5 to 6:30. If you can just drop in, we're going to be doing some judging, I think, of the art. This Thursday. That's all I have on the mayor's report. What was the time again? 5 to 6:30. So I mean, you don't have to commit for the whole hour and a half, but if you can come for a few minutes, it'd be appreciated. Attorney's report.
One quick thing, Mayor. Next week, the 26th and 27th, is the Municipal Attorney's Winter Conference at the School of Government, and I'd like to attend that School of Government conference, using the travel policies of the town.
I think it's just, we don't need a motion, Charlie, just give everybody a heads up, right?
Well, no, they have to approve my travel.
I'll entertain a motion to allow Charlie to attend the School of Government.
That's because of the travel policies after the meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner McCool. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Anything further? Town manager's report?
I have something, and I apologize for having something. But at the last meeting, the question was raised, like, how come we're doing so well in property tax collection? And I didn't have an answer. And so I wanted to follow back up with you, the board. What we do is when we budget, we take the county's numbers and then we just crank it all in. And the county, there's two kind of facets here. Because it was revalue, the county was very conservative on our initial numbers that they gave us, and they were actually $94 million light, I guess I would say. That $94 million, you multiply our tax rate, that's about $263,000. The other thing at play is after the budget was adopted, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to hedge against appeals, because they have this number, but people still have the ability to appeal. One of the things we did in all the towns in the city and the county did this 4% appeal. Right now, the last number we got was about 3.5%. So we're doing better on appeals. What that means is money in our pocket, and that's about $63,000. So those two together, about $320,000 to the good, just because we've been lucky, I guess. So.
We won't have any trouble spending it, will we?
We've already spent it tonight.
Barricades.
Yeah. But these are good things.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Penn, seconded by... You can make it. All in favor? All opposed?